5 seconds, Stan. From the mountains of central British Columbia to you listening around the world, this, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. I'm your host, Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters. We welcome you to tonight's show on our terrestrial affiliates around North America and digitally on TalkStream Live and Revolution Radio. If you want to take a listen to our archives, they are free for you at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. Tonight's show is brought to you by Chive Charities. Help make the world 10% happier by visiting Chive Charities today. You can find them on our website. When legends rise, people like Stan Gordon jump into action. As for the last 55 years, Stan has been one of the best-known and highly regarded cryptid researchers in North America. He has been involved with the examination of thousands of UFO and other strange reports from across the Keystone State and North America in general. Stan gained prominence from his first-hand investigation into the well-remembered 1973 UFO Bigfoot series of sightings and encounters which occurred in Pennsylvania. He founded the Westmoreland County UFO Study Group in 1970, which expanded to the Pennsylvania Center for UFO Research in 75. In 81, he founded the Pennsylvania Association for the Study of the Unexplained. This man has been there and done it all, spoken all around the world on these fascinating topics, and we're glad to have him here once again. Then at the bottom of hour number 3, I will bring you the SOR Newswire, the Thought of the Day, and we are going to go to Vancouver and join up with the Shift live as well. Mr. Stan Gordon, always a pleasure to have you on Spaced Out Radio. How are you, my friend?
We're doing fine, Dave. Thanks for having me back on the program.
I got to ask you, 55 years you've been doing this. Are you still hungry for the chase?
Yes, I am. And actually, I started this in 1959, so it's just a little bit longer than that. And, after all these years of investigating, I've never personally seen a UFO or Bigfoot myself. Seen a lot of evidence out in the field, interviewed thousands of witnesses, but I've never had my own encounter.
Do you feel ripped off?
No, it kind of keeps me skeptical, but I know without any doubt that a lot of credible people are seeing something out there which we just don't have the answers for.
Okay, so if you've never seen a UFO, why keep doing it after 55 years? Why keep that drive alive?
Well, I get reports on these phenomena continuously. My hotline's been open since 1969. And maybe I should give you a little bit of history so we can get into some of the reports. But I started this in 1959 when I was 10 years old. And my interest got more and more. When I was 10 years old, my parents gave me an AM radio as a birthday gift. And it was around the Halloween season, and there was some radio shows talking about unusual happenings. And I'm listening to these talks about haunted houses and flying saucers and strange creatures, and I was curious, and I went to the local library and began to read all the books they had on the subject. And as time went on, I got involved, and I was 16 years old in 1965 when the incident happened near Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, about 12 miles from where I live. And it was at that point that I started documenting that case. I was breaking on the news around the area that afternoon and evening, and I've been out in the field ever since. And I decided in 1969, well, even before that, the late 60s, I got involved with a research group, a small group in Pittsburgh called the UFO Research Institute. And that was a small group of mainly some scientists, engineers, and professionals. That's where Stanton Friedman started. So I was the youngster of the group, as I recall. But I became the telephone sighting coordinator because I already had a lot of experience interviewing witnesses. So when a report would come in, I do the initial interview and see if the case warranted further investigation. and I stayed with them till they closed down their operation, and I decided in 1969 that I was going to try to set up a hotline for the public to report UFO sightings. So I began to make contact with local police and news media out there, and of course, back in those days was a lot more ridicule, but I tried to come over seriously, and I didn't have too much ridicule, as I recall, and within weeks, the telephone in my home was just ringing day and night with all kind of reports, not only of UFOs, but anything unusual. And it was apparent very quickly there was a lot more going on out there that I could handle on my own. So it was my goal to try to organize some type of a volunteer research group. So that's what I did. So I founded the first group, first of three, in 1970. That was the Westmoreland County UFO Study Group. And I'm about 30 miles east of Pittsburgh, and we started in this area, in the Pittsburgh area. And by 1973, we had it set up that we were covering the whole state of Pennsylvania. So we were all doing this around our regular jobs. And the people in the group was kind of unique in that the majority of people involved were specialists. We had scientists and engineers and technicians and police officers and former military personnel and all kind of specialists, and we were responding to the cases 24 hours a day. And with my electronics background, I set up an elaborate communication center and two-way radio dispatch system in my home so we could radio dispatch some of the investigators out to the scene. And that became very, very important because of the massive wave that happened in 1973, and we are lucky we were set up, and we can talk about that, I'm sure, this evening.
What's with the 70s? Why do you think the 70s were so important to this field, that there was so much action and interaction with UFOs and cryptid creatures?
Well, I'm not so sure anybody really has come up with the answer. I mean, 1973 in particular, I mean, here in Pennsylvania, this massive wave of UFO sightings started day one, January 1st, and continued to the last day of the year. There were literally hundreds of UFO reports coming in. And let me say right from the beginning, my position as a researcher is that you look into the reports, and we always tried to see if there was a rational explanation for what people were reporting. And in many cases there were. Many UFO sightings back then, and of course today, still, when you properly investigate them, many are determined to be either natural or man-made in origin. There's a lot of misidentification. The same thing with even Bigfoot sightings. There have been misidentifications of, for example, a bear, large shaggy dogs, hunters in camouflage outfits, things like that. But every year, even in recent months, we get very detailed reports in from people from all walks of life who have no reason to make up these stories, most of them with no publicity, and these reports go on year after year. But the 70s was an amazing time in Pennsylvania, and then we had that massive Bigfoot wave that occurred in the summer of 73. But also, you might recall, in the fall of 73 is when the United States experienced a massive wave. And that was receiving a lot of news coverage back in those days. So there were many, many sightings going on throughout the year, throughout the country. And while a lot of it was going on here in Pennsylvania, numerous other states were reporting some strange activity as well, but not nearly the type of activity we are dealing with here.
Stan, when people call in to you, okay, and you realize that the majority of them do not want any publicity, they just want to know what is going on. From that time to today, how have those phone calls changed?
Be honest with you, they haven't changed a lot. It's the same thing. Whether I've interviewed somebody back in the 60s or 70s or went out to the scene on multitudes of cases, and you saw the witnesses, you look right into their faces, you saw the emotional response, you saw the animal reactions in some cases, you saw people who were physically shaken. I mean, I saw people with tears in their eyes, and you saw that something happened to them that had a great effect on their lives. And the same thing today. I mean, I've interviewed hunters in the last few years, and I sat there face-to-face with them. Some of these fellows have been out in the woods all their lives, 25, 30 years, never believed any of these stories about seeing Bigfoot or other cryptids. And then they had their own personal encounter. And some of these guys said, I'll never go back in the woods again. I mean, something happened to them that really had a major effect on their life. And so many of these people, I mean, the first thing they quite often say is, you're going to think I'm crazy and I don't want anybody to use my name, but this is what I saw, and they want to know if they are the only one that saw something like that, or if there was something that was similar to what other people may have reported. And quite often they were very happy to learn that sometimes, yes, there are other people confirming those reports, or, yes, there have been numerous other reports of something similar.
Stan Gordon is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. Stan, looking at the past to today, how has your investigative technique changed over the years with the advance of technology, with the advance of the internet, social media, places like YouTube?
Well, when I had my groups back in the younger days, when I was a little younger, and were able to get around a lot better out in the woods and whatever, we were out there day and night. And, we were responding to cases 24 hours a day. So that's why we could document so many of these cases so well, because we would be on the scene within minutes or hours after they occurred. So you had the details of the witnesses, you saw the reactions, you saw the physical evidence, and that was so interesting. But back in those days, of course, with our teams out there day and night, we were documenting everything. We were interviewing people, keeping records of information, gathering samples for labs to examine. And, I don't have my groups anymore. It's been quite a long time. But I'm still in touch with a lot of some of the younger researchers out there who are able to get out into some of the areas that I can't anymore. But until the virus hit in this area, which unfortunately is still very active where I'm at, I've not been able to get out that much in the last year or so. But prior to that, I've been still going out and doing investigations, but I'm also doing many interviews by phone.
Okay, so virus aside, has technology been a blessing in disguise, or has it been the biggest nightmare of investigation for what you do?
Well, I think there's pros and cons on it. Back in the day, we had some equipment, and back in the 70s with our group, we had limited equipment. Of course, we were doing this out of our own pockets, too, but there was a lot of equipment we couldn't even buy. So, for example, we were building our own night vision equipment back in those days. And now with the technology, things have gotten much, much better. And as the technology continued to improve, it did help. So now you've got some good technology with the different game cameras and other type of audio and visual devices out there. You've got better laboratory analysis. I think the one thing that is a little more difficult now is the fact that you've got such great technology for video and for film, but unfortunately it's also easier to fabricate pictures. So, you got to be a little more careful today. And we'd get some good pictures in. I get some good pictures in from game cams and still pictures from cameras and phones. And some of them are pretty good, and some of them are, again, they're identifiable. Sometimes they're just, it's something created from within the camera. Lots of times the people try to take pictures with their phones at night and in the dark at a distance. Cameras not able to properly focus on it. A lot of distortion, so you really don't get a lot of data. But I think the better the technology, the more it's going to help us uncover some of these secrets.
Stan, I had a couple of weeks ago Cliff Barrickman on talking some Bigfoot, and the reason why I bring that up is he made a very strong comment to me where he believes video evidence is dead because of all the CGI, because of the costumes getting bigger, because of the way people can now edit on their own home computers, and it's just gotten too difficult to try and break down another Patterson-Gimlin type film. How do you feel about that statement?
Well, I think that a lot of that's probably correct. That's what I was just stating, that the technology today is so good that you can fabricate almost anything. So it's important from experienced researchers to get out there and interview the people firsthand, get to the site and document it, and find out exactly what there is involved with the interview, what's involved with the video documentation, so you can verify what may be real and what may not be real.
Okay, so do you think we can trust those videos, whether they're trail cams, whether they're, handheld devices like cell phones, or people who just get lucky carrying a camera while out on a hike, like the gentleman did who got tracked down by a cougar in Utah?
Yeah, I think you've got to look at each case one-on-one, which is something we always did. Each case is different, and that's what you have to look at today. But, when you talk to so many credible people, and yes, I've seen some interesting game cams, and a lot of these have never been made public. They're not that great detail, but, I remember one several years ago where some credible people had been seeing a Bigfoot up in a ridge, up in the Chestnut Ridge, where there had been many sightings for years, and you can see a section of a body with long hair hanging off of it, and it kind of fit in exactly what they were describing, but it's not enough detail. It's only showing a section of something, and you can't say for sure it's a Bigfoot, but it was interesting.
Okay, so, over the years, have you ever been shown, whether you've brought it out publicly or just kept it for your own files, have you ever been shown a smoking gun type picture that just absolutely 100% convinced you that this is legitimate?
Are we talking now about a Bigfoot, or are we talking about a UFO?
Well, let's go Bigfoot first and foremost.
Nothing that I can say that fit into the category of a smoking gun. I've seen some interesting pictures. I've heard of some in the last year that other researchers supposedly are looking at. I saw one a couple years ago. The person had of a friend's, but unfortunately that person never followed through, and I was never able to find out who actually took it. It looked very interesting. But, no, I have not seen anything I would call a smoking gun, nor even with the UFO. Yes, I have some good UFO pictures, but again, it's not going to prove what the source of these objects are. And I said years and years ago, from the data that I was seeing, that it is very likely that there's more than one origin to the unknown category. When I started this so many years ago, everything's extraterrestrial. They're all visitors from another planet. And, of course, that's what I grew up with. But over the years, the more and more data I'm seeing is that this is a much more complex phenomena. And there may be more than one origin to what's going on. And, again, the more I know about the cryptid phenomena, the Bigfoot mystery, and some UFOs, I think the phenomena is much more unusual than most people realize.
Stan, for you, what do you need to see, okay, before you get the call up to heaven and figure out and get to ask God whether or not these things are real? What do you want to see? What's the highlight that you hope for?
Well, it would be nice, hopefully while I'm still around, that at least one of these mysteries, that at some point that our government comes out and says, yes, they are real. And I think that's a possibility. But some we're just going to have to wait and see. I just never know. The next phone call I get might be the one that's going to solve the mystery. We'll have to wait and see what's ringing on the line next time.
But the bucket list item. Is it Bigfoot coming up to shake your hand? Is it aliens landing on the ground, walking up to you saying, hey, Stan, good work. We've been following you?
Well, that's something I'd really have to give some thought to. But any of these mysteries, it's been a great journey for so many years. It's 61 years this year, and after talking to so many thousands of people, there's no doubt in my mind that there's a phenomenon ongoing out there. And while we can explain a lot of things, there are indeed mysteries out there which I believe at this point are way beyond our present scientific understanding. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why there's so much government secrecy, because, one, it's a worldwide phenomenon. Let's talk about UFOs now. It's something that goes on a regular basis. I'm sure the government is very much aware of it, but they're not in control of what's happening, and they do not have the answers themselves. They're trying to figure it out.
Stan Gordon is our guest tonight on Spaced Out Radio. We got about 4.5 minutes before we go to break here at the bottom of the hour. Stan, in regards to your own research and all the evidence you've collected over the years, what do you plan on doing with it when you decide to retire?
Well, I've been looking into this, and hopefully we're going to find a safe place. But, again, there's a lot of confidential information, so still figuring out exactly how we're going to deal with that. But hopefully we'll be able to figure out a way to do that.
Okay, so I know Grant Cameron has already decided he is going to send his. There's a big UFO museum in Sweden where he's planning on sending all of his research. Stanton Friedman gave all of his research to the University of New Brunswick. Would you like to see a university in Pennsylvania pick up your stuff?
That would be interesting. Possibly some type of historical society, something like that. So I've been looking at some different ideas, and we'll have some time to plan for that.
Well, I think you got a long time for that too, my friend, because I know you got a lot of gas left in the tank to find some of these cryptid creatures that are out there. We're going to be jumping all over the realms tonight with you, Stan. And, what is your favorite topic? I've never asked you this, and I haven't heard many others ask you this.
Well, I can tell you, in the last several years, my focus has been more and more on the Bigfoot phenomena and cryptids, but I say mainly Bigfoot, because of the fact that I have found some amazingly strange aspects of the Bigfoot phenomena. It's a much more unusual than just an unknown animal, which is why apparently there's no bodies. I'm sure we'll talk about that this evening. And actually, I had a lecture I was doing for several years until the virus hit here called Strange Aspects and Elusive Bigfoot, which I was receiving a great response from the public. And I remember different people being in the audience. One fellow was a scientist, PhD, and he came up to me. He said he was always skeptical, but he said after listening and when I was presenting, he said that's the only thing that made any sense to him of why there's no bodies. And it's just very, very strange. I said years ago, the phenomenon is so strange it protects itself, because if you don't have your own personal experience, it's very hard to understand and believe that this type of phenomenon could exist.
What's the biggest mistake that current and future or new researchers make when coming into this field? Is it the naivety? Is it already having a predisposed disposition on what these creatures are?
Well, regardless of what you're investigating, you must keep an open mind and look at all the data. And I ran into this back in the 70s after the massive UFO Bigfoot wave here, which we'll talk about, some of those cases. That's when I began to make contact with a lot of researchers around the country and around the world. And I began to find out that they were also aware of some of these very strange reports, for example, of UFOs and Bigfoot seen together. But they were reluctant to talk about it. They were afraid of being laughed at by their peers, and they didn't want to get involved. And that's something I found over the years. Many people in the UFO field do not want to associate UFOs with Bigfoot and vice versa. My position is, and after you hear about some of the reports, you understand, I am not trying to get the point across or to say that Bigfoot is a pilot or a passenger in a spacecraft from another planet, because we don't know for sure what the UFOs represent. The fact is that there are some well-documented cases with Bigfoot and UFOs seen together at the same time and place. And it's not just in Pennsylvania. It's going on all across the country and around the world. I can tell you in the last few years, I'm seeing a big difference in response from many people in the Bigfoot community about this. And you're seeing more books being published on this topic now. So more and more people are beginning to become more open-minded and beginning to realize that there's something else to Bigfoot out there, which is why there's no bodies, and it's more than just an unknown animal.
Well, that's the big thing. That is the big thing right there, and I tend to agree with you on that. I know there's a lot of people who don't. They think that the woo is just way too much, and we have to look at things a little bit more scientifically. But as Science Bob McGuire says around these parts, he always states that, science isn't perfect. And science needs to be expanded because science never ends. And if we're closing doors before we've investigated them, that's where the danger begins. Stan, I'm going to get you to hold on right there because we are going to go to break at the bottom of the hour here on Spaced Out Radio. The legendary Stan Gordon is with us tonight on the show. Up next, we're going to ask him about Kecksburg. Did a UFO really crash in Pennsylvania? Let's find out next, shall we? Let's on Spaced Out Radio. All right, we're clear. Solid first half hour, boss. There it is. That's what I'm looking for. All right.
All right.
All right. We got a few minutes here.
Okay. Yeah, we can get into a lot of the Bigfoot stuff and the strange aspects of it and whatever you want to do.
Well, let's go to Kecksburg, get the UFO stuff right out of the way, and then we'll go into some monsters right after that.
Sure.
Yeah, works for me.
That's it. Well, we've got a lot of stories to tell.
I know. You're a gem when it comes to them stories. By the way, third phase of Moon says if you've got a legitimate, cannot be debunked photo of an alien or a cryptid creature, or if you capture a cryptid creature, they will pay you $1 million.
There you go. I don't think that's going to be happening while I'm around.
I don't think we can catch one.
I'm not so sure we can either, after some of the stories I've heard.
I don't know. I just can't wait to get back in the bush on, what day is that? Thursday. Thursday I will get back out to my gifting site to see if we can get any evidence off our trail cam. That's for sure.
There you go. Do you have an EM meter, electromagnetic detector or anything?
Yep.
Magnetic field? Okay. Do you ever take those out with you?
You know what? I have before, but lately I seem to be forgetting them.
Okay. It's something just you might want to check out just for the heck of it. Do you have any power sources around your area where that goes on?
Where the gifting site is, there is nothing.
I mean, in general, where you're having the sighting reports, the history of the Bigfoot sightings in your area.
No.
Okay. Well, some areas, we have power lines and power plants and gas wells, things like that.
Right. Yeah, not in our area. I'm surrounded by forests and unless you consider volcanic activity. I mean, but the volcanic activity around here has been, what do they call it? A dead volcano? Is that what I forget what they call a dead volcano.
Dormant? I'm not sure.
Yeah, but it's been dormant or dead for like well over a couple hundred, I was going to say a couple 100,000 years or so.
Do you have lakes, rivers, railroad tracks?
Lots of lakes, very few railroad tracks. No reservoirs.
Cell phone towers?
Few of them, not many.
Okay. Got a lot of sightings around cell towers, windmill farms.
No windmills here.
Okay.
We're hillbillies, man. We're hillbillies. We're lucky we have internet.
You're better off that way.
Randy in the chat room is asking about caves. Now, I've heard there are caves around. I have not found any around here, but there are some pretty big ones here.
Well, I can tell you, back in the 70s again, where all these sightings were on, there were caves and mines in some of the areas where there were sightings, and my teams would go into the caves and mines soon after, and we never found any evidence that anything was like that was staying in the caves or mines. It may have gone in there temporarily, but nothing was staying in there.
That's scary. That is scary. We got about 1 minute here, boss. 1 minute.
Okay.
All right, 40 seconds. Want to say thank you to Kimberly for kicking off the Super Chat tonight. Thank you for everybody giving us a thumbs up so far. We really do appreciate that. 103 watching live. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're new and ring that bell so you know when we are coming on live here because we do it all for you guys. So, if you could do that for us, we'd appreciate it. Hold on 1 second. We're going to get going here in 5 seconds. Second half hour of Spaced Out Radio is underway tonight. I'm Dave Scott. Brand new haircut and beard trim. I think I'm looking pretty good, even though you can't see me if you're listening in on the radio, but that's okay. There's a radio show on YouTube. That's a different matter. Anyhow, we want to say thank you to everybody listening on in. Remember that you can check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website, spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. We continue on here. We're going to get into the Kecksburg incident. We're going back to 1965, Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, about a UFO that allegedly crashed there. Stan Gordon has investigated this, amongst other major reports around the U.S. and especially in the Pennsylvania area, which is his home state. Stan's website, if you want to check it on out, stangordon.info. Lots of great information there. Stan, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back on, Dave.
No problem. Is this the point where I mentioned on our pre interview phone call that you gave me crap for calling you Mr. Gordon?
Well, that's okay. I think we know each other. We can call each other by our first name.
All right, fine. Mr. Gordon, Kecksburg, what actually happened there? Was there a UFO?
Well, there was no doubt there was something there, and by the terminology, I think we'll call it an unidentified flying object because we still have never had any definitive answer as to what it was that fell that day in 1965. I remember it very well. I was 16 years old, and how I got familiar with the case quickly was I was tuned into KDK Radio in Pittsburgh, which was the big radio station at the time. They had a well-known talk radio show called Contact. The host of the show was a late Mike Levine, and he had been advertising he was going to have a special guest on that night, whose name was Frank Edwards, I'm sure you'll recognize, who was a journalist who had written books on strange occurrences. So I wanted to listen to see what Frank Edwards had to say. And I'm listening to the radio show, and almost from the start, the program is beginning to focus on this breaking news of this brilliant object that was seen, this fireball that was observed from Ontario, Canada, over Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. It was a very interesting program. They were reading the wire news stories that were breaking. They were interviewing eyewitnesses. They were interviewing newsmen. And it continued on throughout the evening. On the news, it was a primary news story. Later on, KDK TV was breaking in with live reports later that evening that whatever the object was, it apparently fell into a wooded ravine near the small community of Kecksburg in Westmoreland County, so it's about 12 miles from my house, and that the military was arriving to search for an unidentified flying object. And I remember back that night we had an old black and white console television. I was running from one room to the other trying to get the latest reports from the TV and from the radio. I wasn't driving yet. I had no way to get out there. And I stayed up as late as I could and started writing all the information down. And the first thing I did the next morning, I went to the local newsstand and picked up all the newspapers, hoping it would make the news. And there it was, headlines in all the local papers. It made the national news. And our local paper, the Greensburg Tribune Review, had two editions. The morning edition was Army Ropes Off Area, Unidentified Flying Object Falls near Kecksburg. And it was a very interesting, detailed account from Bob Gaddy, who was the reporter who was on the scene that night. Actually, there was another one, but he was the primary reporter who was on the scene. And the follow-up edition had a number of different stories, primarily from Bob's information. But the initial story indicated that something apparently fell, that no one was being allowed anywhere near the area. There was talk that maybe radiation involved, that they are awaiting the arrival of civilian scientists and Army engineers to examine whatever it was. The later edition of the paper had a number of different stories. One of the main stories focused on a young boy and his mother. The young boy was out riding his bicycle with his sister. She wasn't looking, but he saw the object, the fireball, out of the corner of his eye, going down into the woods. And he hurried home to tell his mother about it, and she looked out, and a short time later there was a column of kind of a bluish, grayish smoke going up over the woods, and it dissipated very quickly. So multiple people were calling the local radio station here in Greensburg to report what was going on. And John Murphy was the news director at WHAB at the time. He was out on another call, and he got a radio call from the station that there was a report of an explosion in the sky off of Route 30 east of Greensburg, and he hurried out there, but he didn't see anything, and he hurried back to the station, and the phones were ringing off the hook from all these people calling in about seeing the object, just like what's happening all around the greater Pittsburgh area, the radio, TV, and newspaper people. And anyhow, there was a lot we did not know that night. And there's even many things we still don't know today. But anyhow, going back to that time period, there was a lot of details we didn't know. And the later edition of the paper, among the stories, was that the story focused on that search for the object, searchers failed to find object. And it went on to say that authorities had made a thorough search of the woods during the late to the early morning hours. They had found absolutely nothing, and the official explanation already was people had been mistaken. They had seen a bright meteor in the sky, and nothing had fallen to the ground. And officially, that's how the case remains today. Well, as I said, I started documenting the information that day, and I tried to follow up with them the next few days, but there was very few names in the paper, not a lot of details locally to follow up with anybody. It was a community out there, which I knew hardly anybody, and over a period of weeks and many months and many years, I tracked down hundreds of people who were involved. These were people who saw the object in the sky. I interviewed people who saw the object come right over top of their heads before it fell. I interviewed people who saw the object fall down into the woods. I interviewed people who went down into the woods right after it fell and saw the object semi-buried in the ground. And what the witnesses told me was what they saw, this thing was about 10 to 12 feet in length, about 8 to 10 feet in diameter. It was like one solid metallic acorn-shaped object, kind of an off-gold bronze color. But there was no rivets, no seams, no fuselage, no windows, no wings, no propellers, and there were no reports of any parachutes. And the object was completely intact. I kind of caught a crash landing because even though witnesses said as they watched it fall from the sky, it came down relatively slowly, almost like it made a controlled landing. And the object crashed through the trees, so it knocked trees down, broke trees, but the object itself was very much intact, semi-buried in the ground. And, of course, what was so interesting was that the military arrived very quickly in the area, according to many, many eyewitnesses. And but there was a way we discussed it. There were first civilians that came in. Then you had volunteer firemen who came in. They were looking for a possible downed aircraft because as reports came in initially locally, some people thought it was an aircraft that was on fire, may have crashed in the area. So they're out looking for a downed plane. And then you had the military come in. So once the military arrived on the scene, they took control of the situation, and the firemen and everybody else were removed out of the area. The area was cordoned off. But among those who I tracked down were people who were hiding in the woods and got to see the object before the military got there, or there was a small number of witnesses that actually saw the military operation of recovering some of the object. I interviewed multitudes of other people who were there that night, including reporters. So this was interesting because you had reporters there on the scene from all the local newspapers, radio, and TV. So they either interacted with the military or saw the military personnel. So what is military equipment and jeeps and trucks and a flatbed tractor trailer, and actually two military flatbed tractor trailers on the scene that night? What are they doing in a farming community during the night? And, of course, the next day, the official explanation is there was nothing there. Well, I later learned, this would have been the summer of 1990, before we did the Unsolved Mysteries TV show on this, that a man came forward and talked to me. He wanted confidentiality, as many of the witnesses did, and do today with other cases, and he provided documentation. He said he was a member of the Air Force Police, the Air Police, and he was stationed at Lockbourne Air Force Base near Columbus, Ohio, and he said they were notified this object had been recovered in Pennsylvania. It came into Lockbourne Air Force Base during the early morning hours of December 10th, the next morning, and he gave a lot of detail how it came in on a military flatbed tractor trailer with a tarp over it. They backed the truck and the object into a hangar. They set up a security perimeter around the hangar, and they were given a shoot-to-kill order to anybody approached the hangar without the proper clearance. He said it did not stay at the base that long. It continued on to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And then I received information from another source that was at Wright-Patterson and confirmed exactly what building it went to at Wright-Patterson. It was not Hangar 18, as people talk about. It was another facility. And where it is at today, we do not know. But there's a lot more to the story. We could talk for days and days about Kecksburg and all the interesting things that people saw on the scene that night, how some people interacted with the military. And I think one of the more important things that came out, and some people went public with this, or, there were some witnesses that went public. There are multitudes of witnesses over the years who I talked to who wanted to remain anonymous, and unfortunately, so many of those people now have passed away. So many of the witnesses now are up in age, or their health is very, very poor, so they're not able really to talk about it anymore. But a lot of this is documented, and I produced my own documentary on it called Kecksburg: The Untold Story, and it went into great detail with some of the key witnesses about what happened that night. But it's an amazing story, multitudes of theories out there as to what this object was, and hopefully someday we'll have an answer. But as more time goes on and we lose more and more witnesses, we may never know the truth about what really happened that night in '65.
All right. Okay, so when it comes down to what this object was, in your opinion, do you believe that it was something from space? Was it an alien craft, or do you believe it was a meteor or maybe some sort of government type project, whether the United States or China or Russia or whoever it may be?
Well, again, it's a very long, complicated story, and I've always said I keep an open mind to all possibilities. You've got to remember now, it's 1965. It's the early days of the space program. This thing is pretty large. It's big enough for a human to stand inside of. There's no rivet marks, no weld marks, no seams. One witness who was standing right next to it, a few feet away, was a volunteer fireman. He became a machinist. He worked with metals all his life. He said he had never seen any kind of a color of metal like that. It was so unusual, but he said it looked like somebody took liquid metal and poured it into an acorn-shaped mold. It was one solid piece of metal. This thing was moving relatively slowly. It made change in direction along its trajectory. It made a slow descent with no parachutes being reported in the area. And it's a fascinating story. Whatever it was important enough for our government to apparently respond very, very quickly.
Why do you think, if it wasn't a UFO, that the government hasn't admitted to what it is?
Well, again, many, many theories. And one of the first theories we looked into for years was Cosmos 96. Cosmos 96 was a Soviet Venus probe that coincidentally re-entered the Earth's atmosphere on the same date, but around 3:18 in the morning over Canada. This happened about 4:47 in the afternoon. And there was a lot of searches for records, a lot of experts were talking to about this, and just from the data that was looked into, especially around 2002, 2003, when Leslie Kane, the investigative journalist, had a group called the Coalition of Freedom of Information that was being backed by the Sci-Fi Channel, and they did a major investigation on this case, and they were able to follow up on a lot of things that I wasn't able to do, and Cosmos 96 has pretty much been ruled out now. And there were many other theories. Another fellow told me years ago that it was a projectile fired from a giant gun from a railroad car in Canada. Since the 50th anniversary, I think there were 4 more different theories came out of what people thought this thing may have been. And everybody thinks their theory is right, but it doesn't fit with what we know. And there's more to the story, too. Here's the thing about investigating this case. There were lots of little details that I was running into over the years, but I did have enough documentation, enough confirmation from independent people to verify it. So it took me years, for example, to be able to confirm some details. And I have some details today I haven't publicly made because I still don't have enough documentation on it. But one of those things was, one, there wasn't just one military flatbed tractor trailer at the scene. There were 2. One of them I found out went earlier in the evening. It had a longer, lower payload of something under a tarp. And then later, the object, the vertical object that they removed from there, went out on a flatbed. It went out around 1 o'clock in the morning, then went to Lockport Air Force Base. So we have that. That was interesting. There was other little tidbits, too, that are very fascinating. And again, we can speculate forever. We can go and talk forever about all these different details we've come up with. And, you know, something interesting, I think you said you had Grant Cameron on last night. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did Grant get into Kecksburg at all?
No, we went on a little bit of a different angle with Mount Shasta and a little bit of the government disclosure portion of everything.
Well, Grant is a very good researcher. I've met Grant several times. We've been in touch over the years. But Grant did a very interesting search for documents on Kecksburg. You know, that's one of his specialty was looking into our U.S. presidents and their connection with UFO cases. And back a number of years ago, he went to the Lyndon Johnson Library and looking for records on Kecksburg. And interestingly, he found something of great interest. What he found was he found records of who was at the Johnson Ranch the next day after the Kecksburg incident. And you can go to his website. I'm sure that report is probably still on there. But who was there, for example? James Webb, the director of NASA. And we had heard, and people I interviewed, some people told me that not only was there Air Force and Army personnel on the scene at Kecksburg, but people told me they either saw or interacted with NASA personnel as well. So you had James Webb, who's the director of NASA. You had all the Joint Chiefs of Staff who were there the next morning, which is kind of interesting. You had the governor of Pennsylvania who was there. You had the director of Office of Science and Technology, Dr. Hornig, was there on the scene. So it was interesting that you had some key people here that was very likely have some important part to play if something of major interest may have fallen in Pennsylvania the day before.
What about the reports, and I have one of my listeners, Chef, is pointing this out, that it was part of a nacelle from an SR-71?
Again, there's been a lot of theories on this. There have been shows done about these type of things. And, again, these are just different theories. I've never seen any connection or any documentation that's what is the case.
Well, that's one way to put it. One way to put it strongly right there, as we have Stan Gordon here on Spaced Out Radio. We got about 5 minutes here before we have to go to break at the top of the hour, Stan. So with Kecksburg, we didn't hear of any aliens. The people who ran in, I believe there were some civilians who ran in just to make sure it wasn't a plane crash or anything like that, to check it on out. There was no sight of extraterrestrial life or any sort of presence that way. I'm curious, you know, if this was an alien craft, do we think this was almost some sort of satellite?
Well, there's something else we haven't talked about. And, again, this could take up a lot of time, but there was some interesting information that came to my attention probably over the last 25 or so years. And, I mean, years and years ago, I heard rumors that there have been some bodies found at the scene and never was able to find any information about anything like that. But after we did the Unsolved Mysteries TV show, a man contacted me. And he said to me, now that it's on TV, I guess I'm allowed to talk about it. And I said, well, what are you talking about? And he went on to tell me how he was a truck driver, worked for a large supply house in Ohio, and how I believe it was 2 to 3 days after the Kecksburg incident that a Navy officer came to that facility and ordered a large supply of a special type of glazed engineering brick to be sent to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And anyhow, what I found out later was there was a second truck driver who initially didn't want to talk about it, but later Leonard Stringfield interviewed him, and I interviewed him, and he later did confirm that he was the first truck driver. He took the first truckload of bricks in the day before that this fellow who called me, who also went with him the next day. But on the first trip, when he got to the base, he was escorted in, and there was the military flatbed trailer with the tarped object sitting outside of this building. The next day, when he and the other driver I talked to, Myron, went there. The flatbed was there, the tarp was laying over it, but the object was not there. And they were told, just unload your bricks, go and do your work, but don't be looking around and ask any questions. Well, this fellow Myron, he was very, very curious, and he kept seeing fellows coming in and out of this building with, he believed that they were Navy personnel from what he was seeing. They had sidearms. They were periodically changing their outer clothing. And anyhow, at one point, when he didn't see anybody around, he went and entered this warehouse building, and he saw up on scaffolding this object, which he described the same way. And by the way, I don't think I mentioned it, on the back of the object that they saw in the field, and also Myron saw, that there were what appeared to be raised up symbols off the back part of the acorn. One witness called it the bumper area. And luckily, that witness, because of his background, he was familiar with Russian, Cyrillic, and he said that is definitely what it was not that. He said that it looked like some type of ancient writing. And later, over the years, when he had some time from his memory, he went to the library and looked for ancient writings. He said it looked similar to ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. And so anyhow, that was very, very interesting. And so Myron described seeing this object up on scaffolding. There were ladders going up. These fellows were apparently trying to open this thing up, get inside of it. And he started asking questions, and apparently at some point they realized he didn't have the proper clearance. And basically he told me that they told him, don't talk about what you've seen, or we're going to put you in jail and throw away the keys, but in 20 years this will all be public knowledge. And, of course, that never happened. And so Myron's story is very interesting, but there's more to the story. When I went to interview him for my documentary, so that would have been about 1996, and he was in poor health. He's passed away, unfortunately. And he said, I have something else to tell you. And he went on to say that, he said, I saw something else. He said, I didn't talk about it, but when I went inside the building, he said the lighting was not very good. He said there was a workbench there, and he said there was a body on the table covered over with a white cloth. He said, I really couldn't see anything. I believe he told me he was around 4.5, 5 feet tall, 4.5 feet tall. And he said, all I could see was the left arm hanging down, and I could only see 3 digits. And he said, from what I could see, the skin looked kind of lizard-like. And that's all he told me, and he would not change the story. He never did. And so that was one of the first stories we heard, which was very interesting. And since then, I've heard some other accounts that suggest the possibility there may have been someone or something inside of the object. Once again, I keep an open mind to all possibilities of what this may have been, but and hopefully someday we'll have an answer. But right now, of course, it's still a mystery.
And that's pretty much where we are at. Stan, I'm going to get you to hold on right there because we are going to go to break at the top of the hour. Mr. Stan Gordon is our guest tonight, legendary cryptid and UFO researcher. We wrapped up our conversation on the Kecksburg UFO incident. We're going to get into some monsters, some Bigfoot, some Chestnut Ridge coming up on Spaced Out Radio in hour number 2. Stan's website, if you're wanting to check it on out, I highly suggest you do, is stangordon.info. Some great photos on there as well. Stan's got great hair, by the way. Fantastic hair. Imagine what he would do with a good mustache as well. I'm sure it was there back in the day. Spaced Out Radio continues right after this. Honestly, man, that is fantastic hair you have. Looking at the picture on your front page of your website.
Yep, I've still got the hair, luckily.
That's beautiful, beautiful. All right, I'm going to just run my dogs outside. I'll be right back, boss. Hold on.
I will be hosting some great guests with topics that affect us all, such as UFOs, ghosts, and everything paranormal. Let's learn together on Spaced Out Radio Sunday with myself, Michael W. Hall, the paranormal lawyer at spacedoutradio.com.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app. Free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
We are scouring the world for the most intriguing stories of your day. Take the time to read up on the SOR Newswire, where our team, led by Captain Shirk, will deliver to you some of the best paranormal and supernatural news, along with some stories that will blow your mind from the weird to the wacky. It's the news outside the news that piques interest, and that's what we're looking to deliver to you. The SOR Newswire, only at spacedoutradio.com.
The party is always on at the Moose Vancouver. The Moose Vancouver is where you want to be when visiting Canada's West Coast. Open until 2 a.m. nightly, the Moose cranks up the rock while serving some of the best rated food in the city. The menu starts at $6.95. Why party anywhere else in Vancouver when the Moose is right there? Get your horns up and rock with the Moose, the official party bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Hello, Space Travelers. It's me again, Carl. Don't forget to join the Space Travelers Club for just $5 a month. And follow Spaced Out Radio on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Our Instagram, Dave Scott SOR. Our Facebook page is Spaced Out Radio Show. Our archives are free at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Come woo it up with Spaced Out Radio today. Bye!
Get your horns up with me on Spaced Out Radio. This is Ron Bumblefoot Thal. Come tune in to SOR where you can hear me rock out with Little Brother is Watching, the official theme song of Spaced Out Radio. And then come on over to bumblefoot.com where you can find out about my tour schedule, my music, and everything else. Bumblefoot.com keeps you up to date on what I'm doing and the best way to stay in touch with my music and music camps. Sign up for my newsletter at bumblefoot.com and remember, Little Brother is Watching.
The SOR Vault is open for business, and we have some cool swag for you to pick up. All you have to do is head over to our website and click on the SOR Vault. You have a variety of cool logos to choose from, and put them on anything you want. T-shirts, hoodies, hats, coffee mugs, you name it, we can get it to you. So do your shopping by supporting the store you love. Get your Spaced Out Radio swag at the SOR Vault today.
I'm feeling a little spicy tonight. What to do?
Why not get Bumblefuck?
4 million Scoville units of pure hard rock. Bumblefoot hot sauces come in 3 flavors. The burning Bumble. Tone it down a bit with Bumblicious and throw the sauce on everything.
Spice it up. Bumble me, baby. Bumblefoot hot sauce. Get it today at kajans.com.
Are you an experiencer of something strange that can't be explained? Do you want help finding out what's going on? I'm Ryan Stacy, head of the Experiencer Support Association, otherwise known as TESSA. We've teamed up with Spaced Out Radio to investigate cases filled out in the SOR Sightlines report. We are independent and there's no cost to what we do. All we need is your experience. Let's find out what's happening together.
All right, my friend, I am back.
Hey, I'm back, Dave.
Oh, no worries, no hurry. We got 2 minutes. All right, who else we got new in here? JK, Ray from the UK, welcome to SOR's chat room. Goof on, hey, little Richie G, if you're still listening, congratulations on breaking 100 on your live tonight. You deserved it, well deserved, number one. And number two, to get Tucker Carlson's associate producer to call, fantastic work. We'll give you a few claps, Richie G. Square Hammer, you forgot to answer my question. Are you on the square? Are you on the level? Are you ready to stand right here, right now, before the devil? Or in this case, with this show, the Davo. Let me know about that if you don't mind. Hey, Walter, good to have you back, man. Let's see. Where are we? October 14th, tomorrow, we got Mike Miss, and you get a special Science Bob and Friends with John Alexander tomorrow night. Thank you to Kimberly for the super chat. Thank you for everybody tuning on in. If you're new here, don't forget to hit the thumbs up. But more importantly, hit that subscribe button and the bell. Here we go with hour number 2.
You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show.
Hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio is now underway. I'm Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters. Thank you so much for joining us. Hi to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America and digitally on TalkStream Live and Revolution Radio. Remember, you can check out all of our archives for free by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Let's find it here. Paravent. Paravent is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. Tonight we introduce Stan Gordon. He is a legendary researcher of the cryptid world based out of the state of Pennsylvania. And boy, do I love that state. I've been there a few times. It is gorgeous. First place I ever saw lightning bugs. Never seen them before in my life till I was in my mid-30s visiting there. Still amazes me. Still amazes me. Anyways, apparently there's some other weird stuff running around the forest that Stan is going to talk about as his website, stangordon.info, if you want to check it on out. Mr. Gordon, welcome back to the show.
Okay, Dave, thanks for having me back on again.
Not a problem. Chestnut Ridge. This is a strange place. We've heard the crypto guru, Ronald Murphy, talking about it a number of times on this show. But what is actually going on there? And for people who do not know or may not have heard about Chestnut Ridge, give us an explanation.
Okay, well, Ron actually lives up in that area now, so he's very close by. And I spend many days and nights over many, many years investigating incidents up in the Westmoreland County side of the Chestnut Ridge. So the Chestnut Ridge is a part of the Allegheny Mountain System, but this ridge area extends maybe about 100 miles or so. It goes through Westmoreland, Fayette, Indiana County, and southwest Pennsylvania, extends down outside of Morgantown, West Virginia, to around Preston County, West Virginia. But year after year, we have reports of UFO sightings, Bigfoot, cryptids, other anomalies being reported along the ridge. And, you know, I think I first began to hear about the incidents up on the Chestnut Ridge late 1960s. I remember I was investigating the incident. I had a report of, again, a daylight sighting of a very large cigar-shaped object right over top of the trees. Looked like it was landing in the woods along a major highway where people were watching this object one afternoon and went out to investigate and began to interview people around that area. And some of the people began to tell me accounts of strange things that had been happening up on the ridge only miles away. And that's when I started looking into it. And since that time, I've investigated multitudes of reports of all kinds of phenomena, especially along the Westmoreland County side around Derry Township and going into Fayette County. Just amazing reports, some of those which we can talk about. But a lot of that area we focus on with that major accounts that happened in 1973. And I told you a little bit earlier, first we had that major UFO wave in 1973. It was all year long. There were hundreds and hundreds of UFO reports coming in, and many of these were not high-altitude sightings or just lights in the sky. There were many reports of large structured objects that were very close range, low altitude. Many reports of these things hovering over fields and highways, pacing cars. There were landing reports. It was amazing the kind of quality of detailed reports that were coming in. But it was the summer of '73 when we had this major outbreak of Bigfoot sightings. And the story that really broke that I investigated, the case that really started this off, occurred on July 31st, 1973, a few miles away from where I live in a rural area outside of Greensburg. It was a wooded area not far from what was in the Green Gate Mall complex. And I got a call from a relative of a person who called me about a week later, August 7th, I believe it was, and told me that I need to go talk to this person, that something very strange had happened the week before. So I found out that that fellow was home, and I went that day to interview him. And this gentleman, the evening of, again, July 31st, he was shaving early in the bathroom because he got up early for work. It was a warm evening. He had the window open in the bathroom, but the screen was in. He was shaving early because he always got up early for work, as I mentioned, and began to smell this funny, rotten odor. He said something like rotten cucumber, but some of the other family members that smelled it said it was more like a sulfur, rotten egg smell. And he happened to turn around and look in the window, are these two huge glowing red eyes staring at him. The window's over 8 feet off the ground. So he ran into another room and called the people there, and they came back out. By the time they got there, whatever was in the window was gone. The dogs outside weren't barking. They thought it was so strange. Their dogs bark at everything, and they didn't make a sound. And the fellow was so shook up, he ended up in the hospital. And he was there for about a week. And I went out to interview him the week later, August 7th, and he's still very, very shook up. He told me about what happened. But while I'm there, I find out that some of the local boys, several weeks before, were going to take a walk over to the local mall through the woods, and they heard this noise in the woods, and I figured it was some deer, so they began to set some rocks in to scare this deer out. But instead, this 7 to 8 foot tall, hair-covered bipedal creature came out of the woods and walked across the road up behind the house. So some of the boys they were able to bring over, and I was able to talk to them and interviewed more people, and I got the okay to go up and look around on the property around there, and a few of the young boys followed me up the hill. And I'm looking around for a while, and I remember how bad the ground conditions were. They weren't very conducive to tracks. So I'm there for a while, and I'm ready to leave. When I happen to look down, and here's a partial footprint, and then there's one complete track. Strangest thing I had ever seen. It was 13 inches long, 8 inches wide, and clearly a three-toed footprint. But you could see from the weight of the toes how deep they were in the ground, it was very heavy. So I got on the radio and called one of my helpers. He came out, and we took measurements and took photographs and made a cast. While we're there, we get a radio call that one of our investigators north of Pittsburgh, that morning there was an incident where something 9 feet tall was looking in a home, I believe it was, and the police were called out, and they found large footprints up there. So this started this massive Bigfoot wave that went on for months and months. It started in southwest PA, and then many, many other parts of the state reporting sightings. And many of the sightings were very detailed, close-range sightings, not like you see on TV, where somebody sees a shadow in the dark a half a mile away. Many of these were at very close range. I'm talking 5, 10, 15 feet away from witnesses. Many of the sightings were in daylight. In some cases, you had multiple creatures seen together. In some instances, you had physical evidence at the scene. So you've got to remember now, it's 1973. There's no cell phones. There's no internet. Many of the calls were initially coming into the police departments, and then quite often they're referring the calls to my group to investigate. So we're out there day and night following up on these cases. And back then, a lot of these cases were initially investigated also by the local police or the state police. And so all this is well documented, and I wrote the whole book about the Silent Invasion. It was an amazing time to live through. And when I got involved in these Bigfoot reports, now I had been investigating Bigfoot in Pennsylvania since the 1960s, and I was aware of the history of sightings. And the sightings of Bigfoot in Pennsylvania go back to the 1800s. Of course, they didn't call it Bigfoot back in those days. They called it the wild man of the forest, the wild man of the woods. And there were numerous newspaper accounts from the 1800s talking about sightings and strange footprints being found in the woods. And my position was at that time that some of the witnesses I'm interviewing, they appear to be very credible to some of these stories, and I thought for sure we were probably dealing with an unknown type of animal. Well, as these events of 1973 are continuing to occur, I begin to receive reports from widespread areas of some very strange things we begin to notice. And one of the first things was that my teams would get out to some of these locations, and we would find trails of footprints. Sometimes you had hard ground, sometimes you had mud, sometimes down through the creeks, and then later in the snow. And what was so interesting or baffling was that in some cases we'd follow trails of tracks that would suddenly stop, vanish, and disappear, which made absolutely no sense. So, I have scientists and research people and police officers. I had an anthropologist in my group. We just could not figure out what was going on. It made no sense. And then things began to get much more interesting. We would begin to see patterns emerge. We would have a UFO sighting in a particular area. Within minutes to hours or days later, you'd have a Bigfoot sighting. Or you'd have a Bigfoot sighting, and then you have a UFO sighting. And as time went on, it wasn't just that coincidence. We began to have amazing incidents where Bigfoot UFOs were seen together at the same time and place. And it was just, we just had no idea what we were dealing with. I mean, one of the first reports that caught of our attention was here in Westmoreland County. It was the wife of a prominent doctor at the time, and she had seen this large boomerang-shaped object in the sky and smelt this rotten sulfur smell in the area about the same time. And a few hours later, down the street, she heard gunshots. And when she went to find out what was going on, she found out her neighbor went out in the back to see what was disturbing their dog. The dog was very upset to see this huge, hairy Bigfoot creature beginning to chase after the dog. And a guy grabbed his rifle, started shooting at this thing as it ran off into the woods. And then we had another very strange report north of Pittsburgh. We had two witnesses out in the country waiting for a friend to pick them up when they see this large 7-8 foot tall Bigfoot with white hair. And it's not that common we hear about the white ones. We do get those reports at times. But it's running across the road towards the woods, but in one of its hands it has a glowing ball of light. And a short time later, this object comes across the sky, and it projects a beam of light down into the woods where the creature ran into. And the reports continued, and it got much more unusual. And then we had that famous case, which, again, we could talk for hours about this case alone, but it was the multiple witness UFO landing in Fayette County back in October of 1973. And I remember that day very well. It was October 25th, 1973. About 10:30 that night, I get a call from a state trooper from the Uniontown Barracks up in Fayette County, and he had a very interesting account to tell me about. He had just came back from investigating this incident. It was apparent that he was a little shook up himself, and he said he thought it was a good chance that there was something still up on the farm. He asked if I could get a team up there as soon as possible to investigate. So we did. We got our team together. It was late at night. We got our team together. We packed up our gear. We had our radios, our radiation gear, other equipment, and we found our way up to Fayette County. Got there in the early morning hours. We met with a key witness. There were about 15 people that observed this barn-sized red ball hovering and slowly moving down in this farm area. And anyhow, again, making the story short, the object apparently was moving downward like it was going to land in the pasture. The son of the farmer, it was his dad who owned the property. He was going out to visit him. He saw people standing outside watching this thing. He saw it. He went up on a higher location to get a better view. And as he and two neighbor boys watch this thing, it looks like it's going to land. They decide they want to go up and see what this thing is. So they stop over to his dad's farm. He grabs a 30-06 and a handful of ammunition. And they start proceeding down the farm road in that direction. Well, a few things are going on. One, dogs around the area are going crazy. They have this high-pitched whining noise, and they have these loud baby crying sounds. And as they're approaching towards the area where they're going to walk up to the pasture, all the sounds are getting louder. They angled the truck and left the headlights on so they could see a path of where they were walking, and they noticed it looked like something was draining the power from the headlights, which they had never noticed before. And they finally walk up on top of the hill, and they're standing there, and they just cannot believe what they're seeing. About 250 feet away, this object is now on the ground, or just right above the ground, hovering. It's not a complete sphere at this time. It's a big white dome, like a half a sphere, that's about 100 feet or more in diameter, illuminating the whole area, making that loud whining noise. They're standing there in amazement, trying to figure out what this thing is. But as they're standing there, it gets much stranger. About 75 feet away, there's a barbed wire fence. And along the barbed wire fence are these two tall, hair-covered bipedal creatures, one behind the other, slowly moving towards them. Well, the one kid was so scared at that point, he ran out of the field. And they're looking at these things and trying to figure out what are they seeing. And they realize, well, yeah, there's bears around, but these aren't bear. These things, the one in front is at least 8 feet tall. The one behind it's 7 feet tall. They're moving very stiffly, one behind the other. They're covered with long, dark, kind of brownish, grayish hair that's hanging down off the body. They have no neck. The arms are so long, almost down to the ground. They have luminous, glowing green eyes. The eyes appear to be about as big as a 50-cent piece, and they're luminous and glowing, and they're making that baby crying, whining noise. Well, the other boy, young fellow, yells to him, "Shoot him, shoot him." Well, the older fellow had the 30-06. He didn't realize that in that handful of ammunition, he had 6 pieces of ammo with him. 2 of them turned out to be tracer rounds. So, again, when you fire those trace, you just get that luminous trail. And he fired the first shot, which turned out to be a tracer. He fires the second shot, which is the second tracer, but when he does, the larger of the 2 objects makes a loud whining, crying sound, reaches its hand out as though to grab at the tracer, and the exact moment it does that, that huge object in the field physically disappears. It doesn't take off, it just vanishes. So the loud whining noise is gone. Most of the luminosity is gone. The object is physically gone. The creatures turn around, start walking back along the barbed wire fence towards the woods, and the fellows now is using live ammo, firing into him, firing at mainly at that big creature. No effect on it whatsoever. But remember, he told me many times, he said, "I'll never forget how that thing kept staring at me with those glowing green eyes as I'm pumping live ammo into it with no effect on it whatsoever." And they were quite upset at that point. They ran back to the truck, went to the farmhouse, told the family what happened, and called the state police. And when the trooper arrived 45 minutes later, the fellow was reluctant to even discuss it. He told the trooper, "Just forget about it. I don't even want to discuss it." And the trooper said, "We got a report of 2 similar kind of creatures on the ridge the night before. I need to interview about this." And so they went up in the police car up into the pasture to look for evidence. And the trooper told me the area where the object was on the ground was self-luminescent and glowing, about 100 feet or more in diameter. He said the glow extended up about 12 inches off the ground. He said the farm animals wouldn't go anywhere near it at that point. He said, if I had a newspaper, he said, I'm pretty sure I could read the newspaper from the light coming off the glowing area. And the story continued. Other things happened. It got even stranger during the night. But anyhow, what happened was they ended up going back to the state police barracks. I was told that both the trooper and the witness were separately taken to 2 separate rooms, separately interviewed, and then the trooper called me to come up to investigate the report. And when we got up to the scene, we checked the radiation levels. The glow was gone at that point. The radiation levels were normal. The farm animal still would not go anywhere near the area. It was a very long investigation. It was a very interesting investigation. All the witnesses were interviewed, and that was the case that convinced me and some of my skeptical research associates that the Bigfoot phenomena and even the UFO phenomena was much more complex and much stranger than anything we could ever imagine. And then the reports got even stranger. But I'll get back to you for a question now.
There's just so much information there. I don't even know what to ask. I got lost in your words, my friend. I got lost. But what do you think the tie is in between Bigfoot sightings and UFOs. Do you believe this is an alien creature that has been dropped off here, maybe being studied?
Well, once again, as I said a little earlier tonight, I am not trying to take the position that Bigfoot is an alien pilot or a passenger in a spaceship from another planet, because we don't know for sure what the UFOs are. Many years ago, everything was they're all extraterrestrial spacecraft. Well, I think maybe a small percentage might be today of some of the sightings we investigated, but we may be dealing with something that's much more unusual. And, of the thousands, literally thousands of UFO cases I've investigated, I get reports every year, all year round, including many this year. And many of the sightings I've investigated, these are not lights in the sky. These are large structured objects. Some of them appear to be metallic, solid, and I'll give you some great examples later on about some of the classic cases I investigated. In some cases, these objects were right above the ground or on the ground. These were detailed sightings that you couldn't find a way to identify what these things were, and amazing reports. But I also have reports, even in the last few years in daylight, of what appear to be large structured objects that in some cases just suddenly appear before the witness's eyes. In some cases, they'll physically change physical form, or they'll suddenly just vanish and disappear. I had a case a couple years ago in daylight of a very large cigar-shaped object just hovering there in daylight that suddenly began from one end of the object. It began to fade from one end to the other until it physically just vanished. I've had other incidents over the years that are kind of fascinating, where I remember one many, many years ago where there was a group of people, and only, I think, a couple people in the group were describing and seeing this object hovering overhead where the other people couldn't see it. So could it be that certain people have certain capabilities, certain abilities, they're able to perceive the phenomena and experience certain things other people can't, or is it the phenomena attracted to them in some cases? And it's not just with UFOs. There's similarities with the Bigfoot phenomenon. This is what we're just starting to get into now. I talked about some of these fascinating cases with UFOs and Bigfoot, and the tracks had disappeared. But it was an incident that happened during that wave of 73 and the 74. It's one of a number of cases but this one is the one that convinced me that, for lack of a better term, and once again, as reluctant as I am to say it, we may be dealing with something that's interdimensional. It has a physical and a non-physical component to it. I don't understand the science behind it. I don't think anybody does. But under certain conditions, these cryptids, Bigfoot, certain types of UFOs come into our physical reality. Sometimes they leave evidence, and then they're gone. They come and they go, which is why there's no bodies. And here's the story behind this one particular case. This is February of 1974. This is deep in the mountains of Fayette County, again along the Chestnut Ridge, but some of these incidents have happened not along the ridge. Many of these cases happen in hundreds of miles away across other parts of the state as well. But this particular case was way up in the mountains. And the person lived there. This woman lived in the mountains all her life. She had a little cabin home, and she had no interest in these subjects whatsoever, in Bigfoot or anything unusual. And she was sitting there this one evening watching TV as normal, and she began to hear this noise, something rattling, some empty pop cans on her little porch. And a few weeks before, there have been a pack of wild dogs coming through.
Stan, hold on right there, because we are going to go to break here at the bottom of the hour. We'll continue the story. Bigfoot and aliens, are they tied together? Stan Gordon explains on Spaced Out Radio next. My God, I very rarely get caught listening. And it was too intense there, man. Too intense. It's like awesome.
You haven't got anywhere yet. Wait, we're just getting started.
My goodness. Awesome. Absolutely awesome. Fantastic stuff. All right. Well, I got some hot tea. My daughter came in and brought me some hot tea, which is nice.
I got some cold tea.
I just can't believe that there is that much of a tie between the two. I mean, that's just amazing. Amazing.
Well, like I said, we're just starting to get into it now. And, again, I am not trying to say they're extraterrestrial. Alien doesn't necessarily mean from another planet. It just means from outside, something not from here, something we don't understand. And I think we're dealing with something that comes in out of dimension, for a better term. It's energy related. Remember to talk to you about that.
All right. Kind of goes off. Actually, it's a nice runoff of what Grant Cameron was talking about last night about energy and consciousness.
Yep. It's all energy connected somehow.
Amazing. Amazing. Let me see here. I'm just checking to see if I have any questions. New people coming on in. I think I'm caught up. Let's see here. Could you imagine walking through one of those forests and all of a sudden coming across that bell, that acorn, whatever the hell it is?
Whatever it is, that's for sure. Well, like I said, there's a lot more we didn't even begin to get. There are multitudes of theories, but the point is, nobody has any proof for any of the theories, and they don't fit with what we know. There's more to the story than meets the eye.
Very cool. Very cool. And I agree with you on that.
And we didn't get into that, but there was even men in black suits there that apparently were controlling the military and other cases like that since. So, these guys, whoever they are, they've been around for a long time in a lot of cases.
All right. Let's, we've got about 2 minutes, 10 seconds here.
I'll finish up that story, and then we can get into some other aspects of Bigfoot and the weird stuff that's going on. And
yeah, absolutely. How close have you been to a Sasquatch?
I've never seen one, but I can tell you in '73, up on the ridge, there were a couple farms where this thing kept coming back, and the farmer said that this thing would periodically come back. So we tried at times to stake it out, but we were so limited, and there was so many reports going on. But anyhow, this one particular, I can tell the story on the air, but anyhow, whatever I believe we chased one in the dark through a cornfield that night. It was way ahead of us, moving much faster than we were, making a very loud sound like somebody with asthma. I recorded the sounds, whatever it was, we could never catch up to it.
Very cool. Very cool. It's amazing how fast they are. Amazing how fast they are.
Well, when you see some of the strides of the tracks and the reports we're getting even the last couple of years, I mean, you're talking 4 to 5 foot stride between the tracks.
You got that right. You got that right. For the life of me, man, I can't find another set of prints or a set of tracks. Can't do it. I'm looking. Just not having any luck.
But that's another thing to bring up. Remind me of talking about the footprints, another part of the mystery. That's something else. Bring that up, too, later.
All right. We got 15 seconds. Big thank you to Kimberly for the super chat tonight. Really appreciate that. 151 people in here. Let's give some thumbs up or down, whatever you feel we deserve on Spaced Out Radio. Here we go, guys, with the next half hour coming up right now. We passed the halfway point of Spaced Out Radio tonight. This show is flying on by. I'm Dave Scott, listening to all the Bigfoot stuff that I can take, and I love every minute of it. Thank you for tuning us in. Reminder that if you've missed portions of this show or others, you can check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. Tonight we are talking with the legendary Stan Gordon, his website, stangordon.info, if you want to check it on out. And we're right in the midst of a conversation about Bigfoot and aliens. What is the tie between the two, if any at all? Stan, welcome back.
Well, I'm going to finish that story up because it's such an interesting case. Yep, so anyhow, the lady hears the commotion on the porch, thinks it's a pack of wild dogs coming through. She decides she's going to grab her 16-gauge double-barrel shotgun and shoot over their head just to scare the dogs away. So she loads one chamber, and she walks over and turns on the switch for the outside porch light. She walks to the front. She goes out the door. No dogs around. 6 feet in front of her is a 7-foot-tall, huge, hair-covered Bigfoot. And as soon as she turned the light on, it raised its arm straight up over its head. And what does she do? She fires right into it. She said there's this bright burst of light, like the flash you would see on a camera, big white flash of light, and it physically disappears right in front of her. But her in-laws lived about 100 feet away, and they heard the gunshot. They soon called her, asked her what she was shooting at. She told them what happened. Her son-in-law grabs his sidearm, his pistol. He starts walking down the road towards the cabin, and he encounters what he said was like 4 or 5 hairy people with eyes like coals of fire, took a couple shots, ran into the cabin, and soon after they saw this large object like a big Christmas ornament hovering over the woods at the same time. That's when they called the state police. Well, back at the time, and some of your listeners will remember here in the United States, we had a major national truckers strike. There was some violence going on across the country. In Pennsylvania, the National Guard and the state police were on patrol together. So both state police and National Guardsmen went to the scene. I knew about it that night, but I couldn't get gas to get up there. It was early the next morning. What I found, and of course I interviewed the people and investigated the case thoroughly, but I found out from the primary investigator that when they got to the scene that night, he said he didn't know what was going on. He said by the time they found the place, everything was back to, well, somewhat normal. But he said something very, very weird was going on. He based that on the animal reactions. And I told you earlier, I've never seen a UFO or Bigfoot, but I've seen the animal reactions. And I said long ago, you can fool people, but you can't fool the animals. And very commonly, with many of the Bigfoot sightings I've investigated, including that one, when these creatures are close to the dogs, in particular, the most vicious dogs, the dogs generally are like paralyzed in fear. They won't bark, they shake, they cower, they hide. People have told me they'll lay down and their eyes will move around, but they won't make a sound. Sometimes people told me they wouldn't even eat right for a day or two later. And it also affects horses and cattle and cats and different animals as well. But it's very prevalent in dogs. And he told me when they got on the scene that night, the animals didn't make a sound. They had several very big dogs. I think it was an Eskimo Spitz and a German Shepherd, and he said there wasn't a sound. And I remember him telling me one of the dogs was in a cage, and it didn't move, it wouldn't move, and they opened it up to try to let the dog out, and the dog should have ripped the guy's arm off and wouldn't even move. Now, the next morning, when we got there early, all the dogs were barking as normal. Everything was back to normal. But that night, he said, it was very unusual what was going on the property. And that was the case, among others, that convinced me that we're dealing with something that has a physical and non-physical component to it, whatever it might be. And there's many, many other aspects of this phenomena that's been showing up similar. For example, lots of reports, Bigfoot appears to be a physically solid creature. But there's other cases where, for example, sometimes the whole body is not solid. Sometimes some of it is misty or out of focus. And I've had cases going back in the 70s where people said they saw these things running off, and there were certain parts of the body that they could see through that was not physically solid. I've had reports of Bigfoot-type things that were gliding or floating above the road rather than running. I've had people in the last few years tell me these things have ran out, walked out in front of their cars, and they said it's like watching a Predator movie. The thing suddenly appeared out of nowhere. They see it from head to toe. It moves a short distance and suddenly disappears and it's gone. And reports of these tracks disappearing, they're continuing to be reported in the last few years in the wintertime. There's a great video, a family from North Huntington, where there's been a lot of sightings for years. This was from 2 years ago. They contacted me, and actually, if you see the very good documentary on the trail of Bigfoot that was done by Small Town Monsters, they did a very good episode, and they had permission to show this video. And the people contacted me. It had been a heavy snow the night before. They happened to look out, and here's these large tracks. I believe they're on 15-inch long footprints. There was like a 4 to 5 foot stride or more between the tracks that went the whole way across their yard, came to the family playground, and suddenly stopped, vanished, and disappeared. And this is the kind of thing that's going on, and it's going on all around the country and around the world. We're hearing similar accounts. And I'm not the only researcher that's hearing these reports.
No, I want to ask you about that, if you don't mind me stopping you right there, because so many researchers, the minute they hear a report like that, they are throwing it in the garbage. They are throwing it in the fact that it's too much woo, it's not real, it's impossible to be real, I'm not bothering investigating this.
Yeah, that's a common problem. And like I said, I ran into that back in the 70s. But in more recent years, again, many people in the Bigfoot field I'm talking to and witnesses that they're beginning to take it much more serious now because these reports are becoming more prevalent. And one thing is showing up more and more, not only in Pennsylvania, but again, throughout the country. Many Bigfoot researchers are reporting in areas which have a long history of Bigfoot sightings that they're seeing these orbs of light in the trees, low to the ground, sometimes approaching close to them, or other type of light phenomena in those areas. And this is going on more and more now. And it's something that's beginning to get more attention. And, you know, another aspect of the Bigfoot phenomenon that I've investigated since the 60s, I call them mini UFO reports. And they're fascinating because these objects are generally about 1 inch or 2 in diameter, up to about 1 or 2 foot in diameter. Generally spherical, but not always spherical. And what's so interesting about these type of reports is that they very commonly come very close to people. They'll approach within feet of people, even in daylight. I've had reports of them where people had their windows down in cars or in their homes, and these objects would come inside and float around and generally go right back out through the window, but I've had reports of them also going right through the walls of a house. And so it's very fascinating. And these strange lights seem to be associated with Bigfoot cases. We had a case outside of Pittsburgh last year, early morning hours, in a wooded area. A man happened to get up and was in the kitchen looking out the window. He sees this small Bigfoot, which we have reports of smaller ones too, 4 to 5 feet tall. He said this thing was about 4.5 to 5 feet tall, covered with dark hair, long hair on the head and the back areas, walking upright on 2 legs. The legs extended down almost to the knees. They were swinging, and the area was illuminated pretty well by outdoor lighting, so he had a good look at it. And he said the creature went into a particular part of the woods, and that was the last I saw of it. But about 3 seconds later, at the exact location where the creature entered the woods, a bright sphere of light about 3 to 4 inches in diameter suddenly appeared out of nowhere. And he said it was only about 4 feet above the ground, and this light moved a short distance and then vanished. And a few seconds later, it reappeared about 10 feet away, but when it did, it emitted a bright beam of light that stretched out about 10 to 12 feet and then lasted a few seconds and disappeared. Now, I can tell you, in the last 6 months, I'm getting reports from other people in that same general area possible Bigfoot activity, screams and howls and cries and things like that going on as well. But these are the kind of things that are going on. And I can give you some other very good examples of some other encounters that have taken place in recent years, which, again, show some very strange elements of what's taking place.
I'm willing to hear them if you're willing to share them.
Okay, well, going back now, I mentioned Derry Township. Derry Township's outside of Latrobe, and that's along the Westmoreland County side of the Chestnut Ridge, which has had multitudes of Bigfoot sightings for years and years. And back in September of 2018, a fellow was riding down a rural road. It was a very rainy night, about 75 feet in front of him on the road. He said this thing suddenly appeared out of nowhere. He said it was in the middle of the road, moving from left to right. He said he could see the entire shape of this thing that's about 6.5 to 7 feet tall, but he said it was like foggy or misty. He said that it was kind of stooped over. It was huge and muscular shoulders and a small waist, and he couldn't see the head area very well, but he said this thing seemed to actually not walk or run, but actually seemed to float above the road into a field, and it disappeared. So interestingly, now that was in September. In October, I guess about 2 weeks later, only a few miles away, this time on top of the ridge, in daylight, beautiful morning, this woman's taking a walk. She knows the woods well. She's familiar with bear. They're all around where she lives. And it's a beautiful morning, and she's walking along there, and she hears a couple loud knocks, some kind of noise in the tree line. So she's curious, and she starts walking into the tree line. And she sees this dark tree trunk about 20 feet away, and she realizes that there's something that is actually kind of hugging the tree. And what she sees is this creature is about 7 feet tall, covered with black hair that looks like it's about 3 inches in length. And it actually has its arms completely around the tree. It has its cheeks against the tree, looking directly at her. And she said the face looked pale, and she said the nose wasn't that prominent. It was kind of pushed in. There was no muzzle like a bear. And she said the eyes in this case were very dark, and she said they were it looked like it was shifting its eyes very nervously, moving them back and forth. And she could see the light in the eyes as well. She said its very long arms were wrapped around the tree. The hair in the arms were black and very wiry. And she was very, very shook up, but she ran to another tree about 10 feet away to try to get her composure. She loaded up her camera phone to get ready to run back to take a picture. So a minute or two later, she runs back to the tree, and it's gone. She never heard it coming. She never heard it going. And it's another one of those strange cases. And then the next month, outside of Pittsburgh, now this is an area where there's been a lot of sightings down in this small towns down in this rural area. And this was another rainy night on a 2-lane farm road. And this fellow's riding down the road, again, cold and rainy, had his low beams on at the time. About 50 feet away, he notices something standing on the left side of the road, and he puts his high beam on, moves up slowly, and this huge, at least 7 foot tall, huge Bigfoot literally walks out on the road, no more than 5 feet in front of the car, stops right in the middle of the road with glowing, luminous red eyes looking right to his face. It's so close initially that he can't see the bottom part of the creature, or the bottom part of its arms, till it's turned sideways and begins to take very long strides as it leaps across the road from left to right, swinging its long arms. And he could see the hands were in a cupped position. And it goes up this little slight hill, so he immediately grabs his cell phone, get ready to take a picture of this thing. He's right behind it, and he said, all of a sudden, it's gone. He said, I can't understand. He said, I know it's dark. I have my high beams on. It's right in front of me, but it's just not there anymore. And it's something he just couldn't understand. And we were down there the next morning interviewing him. He was definitely very emotional about this thing, very, very shook up. but gave us an incredible from head to toe, I shouldn't say toe, from head to foot description of what this thing looked like. And he gave us some really important details that fit in with other reports. And these are the kind of reports that are going on, and there's more. I mean, these kind of reports indicate that these things, in some cases, they're here and they're gone, they appear and disappear. And in some of the other cryptid reports, we have some things that are similar as well. It's, again, whatever we're dealing with is very, very strange. You've got all these cryptid sightings. Here in Pennsylvania, we deal with the thunderbirds, these huge, giant flying creatures, including a sighting just last Wednesday.
No way.
We have Black Panther reports, which are very intriguing, more of out-of-place animals, but I've uncovered some very weird things about the Black Panthers, and something a lot of people don't know is that sometimes a Bigfoot will be accompanied by another cryptid, or, for example, maybe a Black Panther or something else. And another thing that's fascinating, you know, a lot of these incidents occur. They might just be spontaneous, being at the right place at the right time, very common. But there are other cases where this phenomena, whatever we're dealing with, seems to target a particular property or a geographical location. So the Chestnut Ridge, yeah, it's very, very active, but it's a long area. It's not one specific area. And we've all heard about the Skinwalker Ranch.
Yes.
But a lot of the phenomena that was going on here in the 70s that I was writing about back then is very similar to what has been going on in Utah for years. But there's other locations around the country and around the world of the same thing, and many people don't know about. I mean, I know of at least one, probably two locations in Pennsylvania that probably are actually still active for years. And the phenomena, for whatever reason, seems to target these areas. Generally, they're areas that may or may not have any kind of major type of history of these phenomena. But, for example, I can tell you back 1979, the summer of 79, on the border of Westmoreland and Armstrong County in southwest PA, people saw an object that afternoon fall from the sky into a field. They never found the object. But soon after that is when the neighbors and the people around there began to report screams and cries and howls. They began to have Bigfoot encounters, strange lights would appear, orbs of light would appear, UFOs, paranormal phenomena, Black Panther sightings were being reported. And interestingly, this was later covered in local newspapers on television. It was such a big, strange series of events. And even in the last month, I've interviewed now 3 different people from different properties within miles of each other in that same general area who've been telling me this is continuing to go on there for years, and even in recent weeks are having things going on. There's another area, Fayette County, another property where they've had this going on now for several years, where they're having paranormal phenomena, Bigfoot, UFOs, orbs of light, and other people have experienced it. So this type of phenomena, whatever it is, the more I know about it, the more it's very likely that a lot of these various phenomena are somehow interconnected somehow. And the one thing that I found that I believe there's association with is energy. What I noticed years ago was that many low-level, close-range, detailed UFO sightings and many encounters not only with Bigfoot but other cryptids very often occur in the vicinity of high-energy sources. So you've got many sightings around high-tension power lines and the local power stations and gas wells or gas lines and radio towers and cell towers and reservoirs and railroad tracks and windmill farms. Goes on and on and on. Very, very often in areas where you have sightings, you have these kind of reports. And just to give you a recent sighting, this was, I believe, August 30th, down on the Pennsylvania borders into Maryland. I interviewed the witness. The witness and her husband are riding that afternoon, just taking a scenic ride. Husband was a believer in Bigfoot. His wife was a firm non-believer in Bigfoot, and they're riding down the road, and his wife suddenly says to her husband, "I think I just saw a Bigfoot." And he said to her, "Why didn't you tell me as soon as you saw it?" She said, "It happened a few miles back." And she said, I saw it. I was in shock. She said, I couldn't even get my voice to talk. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. So they went back down the road, but of course they didn't see anything. But she saw this thing for only seconds, but got a very good look at this thing. She said it was walking along a power line. That's the first thing that caught my attention. And gave a good description of what this thing looked like. And she said to me, I would never have believed it till I saw it myself.
I have to ask you, as we got about 3 minutes to go here, how is a Black Panther part of the cryptid world?
Well, when you talk about Black Panthers, you're generally talking about a black leopard, a black jaguar, not common in this part of the world. But for years and years, again, all along the East Coast and other parts of the country, and many reports here in Pennsylvania, there have been numerous sightings of Black Panthers for years and years. And it's the same thing. You hear these stories. There have been actually official searches for them. One case I can tell you about near Pittsburgh in 1983. There's nothing ever missing from a zoo. There's no idea where these things come from. Once again, you got tracks and they're gone, and nobody refines the animals. But once again now, just like that case I told about back in '79, the early '80s, when they had an increase of local sightings of Bigfoot, they would also have an increase of sightings of Black Panthers. And then I'll give you an example of a very interesting case of, I guess we'd call it a paranormal Black Panther that occurred where else? Up in Fayette County back a number of years ago. Do we have time to talk about that one now?
We have about just over 90 seconds.
Well, I'll just give you the beginning of the story then. Okay, sure. This occurred back in 1983, and it was February. It was a cold morning. Guy was coming home from work, noticed his car's overheating, so he pulls into the driveway and to get some antifreeze. He opens the hood of the vehicle when he hears this growl, and he turns around and looks, and there, I think it was about 20 feet away, he sees this large black tomcat that's growling at him. And then he turned back to continue working on the car, put some more antifreeze in, and seconds later, he hears a second growl, but this time the growl is much, much louder, and when he turns around, he can't believe it. This large black house cat has now physically grown in size. It grew about another foot.
Oh, wow.
And as he's watching this thing, he throws the empty antifreeze jug at it, and he hits it. It growls at him fiercely. It's like it's going to attack, and it took 3 or 4 steps backward, then growled again. He ran inside, grabbed his pistol, and this thing's going up the road, and he fires a shot at it. But now it has physically changed form, and it's the size of a Black Panther like you'd see in a zoo. And it has glowing yellow eyes. And as he watched this thing, he took the shot at it, wasn't sure if he hit it. It turns around, walks up the road, and physically vanishes right in front of him and disappears.
Oh, wow. Oh, there's nothing freaky about that, Stan. Nothing freaky about that.
And these are the kind of things I hear quite often from different people of different type of cryptids.
Oh, wow. Stan, I'm going to get you to hold on as we have you for another 30 minutes. I told you people who are listening that this one was going to go very, very fast. We have Stan Gordon for another 30 minutes here on Spaced Out Radio. Then in hour number 3 at the bottom, we're going to hook up with Vancouver and The Shift, the Newswire, the Thought of the Dave. We got a lot of stuff going on in hour 3 here. Make sure you stay tuned. It is jam-packed. Black Panthers, Thunderbirds, cryptids galore. StanGordon.info is the website. Check it on out. We'll be back right after this. Stan, I'm just going to run my dogs outside. I'll be right back, okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Otherwise known as Tessa. We're glad to team up with Spaced Out Radio to help investigate your experiences on the SOR Sightlines Report. Together, we'll investigate the strange sightings and occurrences you've had. We're looking for answers just like you. So fill out a Sightlines Report on the Spaced Out Radio website and let's figure out what's going on together.
The party is always on at the Moose Vancouver. The Moose Vancouver is where you want to be when visiting Canada's West Coast. Open until 2 a.m. nightly, the Moose cranks up the rock while serving some of the best-rated food in the city. The menu starts at $6.95. Why party anywhere else in Vancouver when the Moose is right there? Get your horns up and rock with the Moose, the official party bar of Spaced Out Radio.
Looking for creative ways to get your company out in the public? How about advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Our sales department is waiting to hear from you, and we can work around any budget. From commercial spots to banners to special promotions, there are many opportunities to get your name and product out to our SOR listeners. For a price guide and more information, please contact us at sales@spacedoutradio.com.
For the price of 1 cup of coffee a month, you can become an SOR Space Traveler. The Space Travelers Club is a place where you can interact with other listeners, either live during the show or on our great forum. We want your stories, pictures, comments, and ideas. You'll get live video streams, exclusive content, and be a part of our newsletter. Stay in touch with everything SOR. The Space Travelers Club is just $5 a month at spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there, this is the paranormal lawyer Michael W. Hall. I'd like to invite you to listen in each Sunday night where we're going to open up your eyes to everything strange and paranormal. I will be hosting some great guests with topics that affect us all, such as UFOs, ghosts, and everything paranormal. Let's learn together on Spaced Out Radio Sunday with myself, Michael W. Hall, the paranormal lawyer at spacedoutradio.com.
The SOR Vault is open for business, and do we have some cool swag for you to pick up? All you have to do is head over to our website and click on the SOR Vault. You have a variety of cool logos to choose from, and put them on anything you want. T-shirts, hoodies, hats, coffee mugs, you name it, we can get it to you. So do your shopping by supporting the store you love. Get your Spaced Out Radio swag at the SOR Vault today.
We are scouring the world for the most intriguing stories of your day. Take the time to read up on the SOR Newswire, where our team, led by Captain Shirk, will deliver to you some of the best paranormal and supernatural news, along with some stories that will blow your mind from the weird to the wacky. It's the news outside the news that piques interest, and that's what we're looking to deliver to you. The SOR Newswire, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Hey, space travelers, this is John Resig, founder of the Chive and Chive Charities. If you know anything about our website, you know we like to do things a little differently. We're not some faceless organization collecting money for a nebulous cause. Our donor dollars go directly toward life-improving items. Then we give those items directly to an underdog who needs it most. To become a donor with Spaced Out Radio's official charity, Chive Charities, just go to chivecharities.org/donate.
Hello, space travelers. It's me again, Carl. Don't forget to join the Space Travelers Club for just $5 a month. And follow Spaced Out Radio on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Our Instagram, Dave Scott SOR. Our Facebook page is Spaced Out Radio Show. Our archives are free at youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Come woo it up with Spaced Out Radio today. Bye!
Hello, this is your...
All right, Stan, I'm back.
All right, we're here.
Rock and roll, man. Rock and roll. Oh, man. This whole Thunderbird thing really screws me up. I'm so intrigued by it.
Well, we can talk about some of those as well.
Oh, the Thunderbird thing just totally just messes me up. Messes with my mind.
Yeah, it's another phenomenon. That's the whole point. You can't have all these unknown creatures out there. It makes no sense. It's impossible. But you got so many credible people seeing them, you can't eliminate it. The only thing that makes any sense is that we're dealing with something that we don't understand. It comes in and out of our reality. It's here and it's gone. Anything that makes any sense, we don't understand it.
Oh, I know. And you know, the only thing, and I know it's gross. I'll ask you this on the show. Yeah, I'll just hold off on that for right now. I will, because I think it's a logical question. You know, as gross as it may be, I think it's a logical question.
What would be your question?
Oh, I gotta wait now. I'm only like 30 seconds away. You know, I got to build suspense here, man. I got to build suspense.
It may be something I do not have an answer for, but we'll find out.
Oh, I'm sure you got an answer because you're damn good that way.
Gee, it's almost time to end, and we haven't even started yet.
I know. 15 seconds, my friend. By the way, Desert Clam, thank you so much for the picture you got of me hugging my daughter, and I really appreciate that. Thanks for posting that on Twitter. All right, here we go, guys.
Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Kicking off the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight, I am your host, Dave Scott. Thank you all for joining us. We really do appreciate your support. We welcome back everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America and digitally on TalkStream Live and Revolution Radio. All of our archives are free. All you got to do is go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Paravent. Paravent is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot and reading up on Captain Shirk's SOR Newswire. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show. For the final time tonight, we introduce good friend of this show, Mr. Stan Gordon. He is one of the best when it comes to everything cryptid and cryptid research. His website, stangordon.info, and right before the break we were talking about Black Panthers, whether or not they are a cryptid. You know, this is a creature, Stan, and we're going to get to Thunderbirds here in just a moment, but this is a creature that many people will say, look, I've seen black leopards, I've seen black jaguars. You know, why should I think that I'm not seeing one of those instead of a black panther?
Well, once again, here in Pennsylvania, this is not an animal that's known to have ever existed in this part of the world. And many people have seen them in zoos. They know what they saw. I've had many hunters who have come across them as well. But the interesting thing, again, is that the same kind of creature sometimes shows up in the same area where you're having Bigfoot activity. There have been cases around the country where more than one cryptid have been seen together at the same time and place. And in all these cases of Black Panthers, people have tracked them. I mean, there was one case in 1983, for example, in a suburb of Pittsburgh. It actually made the news. And we investigated the case, and this was in daylight, and this was a large wooded area. There was a big fence that separated, and on the other side was a large auto dealership. And that morning, a mechanic was putting a headlight on a car when this huge Black Panther dives over the fence, over the car, lands a few feet in front of him with a dead animal in its mouth, sitting there looking at him, staring at him. He can smell it. He can hear it growling at him. He can look at the dead animal, and it turns and goes back over the top of the fence. And several people see a big one and a little one, and they call the Pittsburgh police. That led to a major search by Pittsburgh police and animal people with tranquilizer guns. They searched and searched, could never find them. One of my guys in my group was a former military tracker. He tracked it for a distance, and then the tracks were gone. Nothing was missing, could never account for it. Those are the kind of things that have been going on for years. So it's very strange and unusual. Mountain lion sightings, that's one thing. We all know mountain lions and cougars exist. They were very common in Pennsylvania, but for many, many years now they've been officially declared extinct, but people see them every year. They're not so unusual, but the Black Panther reports are much more unusual.
All right, let's switch over to Thunderbirds here, because this is one that just kind of makes me scratch my head, but intrigues me so much. And that is the fact that there's this giant 40-foot bird flying around. And, there's two things I think of. Number one, that's big enough to be caught on radar. Number two, if that thing went to the bathroom, that would leave one hell of a paint splotch on a car. Okay, and that's probably the biggest thing. You know, like, if there are Thunderbirds flying around, the giant nests, the bird droppings, okay, because it has to go to the bathroom, and what the hell is it eating to be that big?
And of course, yes, you would think there would be some type of physical evidence like that. If it wasn't normal, some type of flesh and blood unknown animal as well. But again, the Thunderbird sightings, very strange. And there's different levels of these different reports. I kind of crop them under the Thunderbird subject title, but a lot of the reports are of these very large flying creatures that look more like some type of overgrown turkey vultures, generally dark brown or black in color, wingspan estimated between 10 to 20 foot in length. And that's very, very common. But besides those kind of reports, you've got another type of report that's been reported. And these are of a featherless, very large, similar wingspan creature that's leathery skin like a giant bat. There have been numerous sightings like that. And then you've got people, and again, very credible people, very educated people, very confused at what they saw because they swear what they saw was prehistoric, that it looked like a pterodactyl or a pterosaur, even in the last couple of years. And some of these have been daylight sightings, very close, very, very detailed reports. So it gets stranger and stranger. And then we've got the winged humanoid reports. And, of course, everybody's heard the Mothman. But one case that's pretty popular around this area, I investigated back in 2011, I believe it was, and this was up in Butler County, north of Pittsburgh. And this witness, in this particular case, is a businessman. I've interviewed him many, many times over the years. I got to know him very well personally and his family. And this occurred between East Brady and Chicora, up in Butler County again. It was early morning hours, and he's riding down the road, and his headlights catches something on the right side of the road. And he thought it was a deer. And as he moves forward and puts his high beams on, this thing rises from the ground, takes 3 big steps in front of his vehicle, and it goes into the woods. But when I interviewed him, he said, you know, I hear people talking about Bigfoot sightings up around here, but he said, this was not a Bigfoot. He said, this thing was at least 8 foot tall, walked in front of a big, like a road sign, and he said it was colored with a light leathery skin. The eyes were swept back. It had claws. He said the legs looked very muscular, and they looked like they were bent backwards, and it had wings in the back, and the wingtips went up the back, and he got a good look at this thing. It had wings. And then within days, several other local residents report to the local UFO group up there, the Butler Research Group, BORU, that they had seen something similar. So that's another phenomenon that's going on. So you've got these reports, and then we had the sighting this last week, and this is in a suburb of Pittsburgh, and this was off of Route 22 in a wooded area, and I interviewed the witness. She just happened to go outside on her back deck that evening, caught something on the corner of her left eye, and looked up, and she sees this thing very low over the tree. She said it looked like a huge, oversized bird, completely gray in color. She said the only way she compared was it was like a hawk, but about 5 times the size of a hawk. She said she was not able to determine if the body was covered with feathers. It was about 40 feet over top of the trees that are about 15 to 20 feet away, so it was very low. It never flapped its wings. It just soared at a very fast pace, but at one point it made a sharp right turn, and she said it suddenly vanished and disappeared right in front of me. She said, I could not understand how it just vanished and disappeared. And she estimated that the wingspan of this thing would have been, I believe she said, around 14 to 15 feet wide. But I had one case in neighboring West Virginia back, I think it was around 2007, where a fellow was riding down a 2-lane road early in the morning, it's daylight, and he had to suddenly hit his brakes. Here's this huge, giant bird blocking the road, eating roadkill. He said it was standing up. It was 4 feet high, at least 4.5 feet tall, that towered above his vehicle. It was looking at him. The driver's looking at him. The bird's looking at him. The wings are flapping. It's so big. It's trying to get off the ground. It's hopping from one leg to the other, trying to get off the ground up to above the trees. And since it's a 2-lane road, he could see the wingtips, and there's dust and dirt flying up as it's flapping its wings, and finally gets up over the trees and it's gone. He was so curious, he went back to the spot the next day and measured it. It was 21 feet across. So that's another one of those mysteries.
My goodness. But physical droppings of this creature, the Thunderbird, okay, it would have to, like I said, paint a car because they only hit clean cars. You know, and I say that in humor, but there is a reality to that. Has anybody ever found any Thunderbird droppings?
Not that I'm aware of. It's just like with the Bigfoot reports. You get footprints at times. We've had, many, many years ago, back in the 70s, we had some interesting possible hair samples that we had labs examine. But you got to remember, that was before DNA testing. And unfortunately, the labs couldn't do much with it, and they had destructive testing back then. So when they did the analysis, they destroyed the sample. And there was one sample that was very interesting because it was a very, very good Bigfoot account where a creature was up on the roof of a low-structured home, and it smelled like sulfur, had a terrible smell. When dogs would smell it, they would instantly react to it. And that was I think the only sample that they said it appeared to be almost human, but they couldn't be sure, which I thought was so unusual because they could identify a lot of the other hair samples. And so you rarely get anything like that. But so, again, you've got all these different creatures, and we didn't even talk about some of the other reports we're getting tonight, but you've got so many different entities and creatures being seen by credible people. You know it's impossible. You can't have so many type of unknown creatures, but you cannot eliminate the reports because so many people were describing the same kind of thing over many years. There's got to be something else we don't understand. And again, with some of these cases, again, we didn't get into it, various types of cryptids in some cases appear to be at times physical and other times non-physical. They can appear and disappear. They come and they go. And the only thing that makes any sense is, again, for lack of a better term, it might be interdimensional. I don't have the answers, but this is what people are reporting.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you next, is in regards to the fact that there's not a lot of evidence with Thunderbird, okay, and wondering if maybe, just maybe, the people who are experiencing these sightings are actually seeing into a portal of time from millions of years gone by.
Well, again, you've got that. That's another theory. I mean, again, you haven't begun to hear some of the cases we were talking about, some of the cases we've investigated, because some of them are even much, much stranger. And when you talk about some of these sightings of pterodactyls, for example, some of these people swear that's what they saw. So that's a possibility. We have people who have told me they've seen like portals in some cases or like swirling effects in some areas where they're seeing various cryptids. We've had reports over the years across the country of balls of light that change into creatures and creatures change into other creatures. That's what I'm saying. It's so bizarre, and I can understand why some researchers are reluctant to look into these reports because they are so strange, but they're not that uncommon. It goes on more and more people are knowing about it, but so many people are reluctant to talk about it because it's so strange and unusual. My position is I don't have the answers, but I have no doubt that some of these people and the reports appear to be very credible, and there's enough of them to make you realize it's something you cannot ignore. There's something going on.
Okay, does this also involve everything that's going on in the Chestnut Ridge? Are they seen in that area as well?
Oh, yeah. There's very good sightings of Thunderbirds up in the Chestnut Ridge, even the last few years. And, there's quite a lot of incidents up there, but it's not just there. It goes on many different areas. And again, what's fascinating, we're getting more and more Bigfoot reports, encrypted reports, in more populated areas. So we're not talking about just thickly woods and forested areas. We're talking sightings in populated areas and near large cities, near Harrisburg and Pittsburgh. And same with UFO sightings. We've had UFO sightings in downtown Pittsburgh. I mean, we had a case several years ago where, while people observed a large cigar-shaped thing hovering at an intersection, I have a copy of a police report. We've had one hovering over the Monroeville Mall in daylight, seen by different people. Many sightings of UFOs on very heavily trafficked highways around here in recent years. It's going on more and more. The phenomena doesn't care where it appears. You're getting more Bigfoot sightings in populated areas, in suburbs of Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and Harrisburg and other places. So there's something else going on here.
That is so strange. In your eyes, what is that going on?
I wish I had the answers. I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. I don't think our government knows. Over the years, so the cases I've worked on, investigated, I've seen indication the government has an interest in both UFOs and the Bigfoot phenomena. And I think the more they've looked into it, I think they may be aware that maybe this is something, again, that's much, much stranger than extraterrestrial. And I think they're slowly beginning to maybe look in the same direction I've been looking at for years as well. There's more to this than just a physical reality. There's a physical and a non-physical component to some of the phenomena we're dealing with.
Do you think, or let me rephrase that, how can we go about proving the true existence of these? What is needed? Do we need a body of a Thunderbird, much like we complain about we need a body from Bigfoot?
Well, it may well be that we're just not going to have any bodies, because if they can do what people claim they can do, we may not have the capability. Yes, we have physical evidence at times. I think someday in the future, as our instrumentation gets better, our technology advances, we're going to have some of the newer type of equipment that can help to record and analyze this information, and maybe we'll learn a lot more, because some of this phenomena, I mean, we might be dealing with something that's physically much closer to us than we realize, but we might not be able to perceive it, only under certain conditions.
What role does science play in this?
Well, over the years, I've noticed that there was a lot of people who scientifically were getting involved in this. A lot of them, especially some of the people I work with, many of them did it anonymously because of their positions. And I'm seeing more and more interest by people in the science field in more recent years who are beginning to become much more open-minded. Some of them I've talked to about the fact that we might be dealing with something, again, that comes and goes. It comes into our reality under certain conditions. We don't understand it. But they're beginning to become a little more open-minded, and I think they're beginning to pursue and look more into these areas that we just don't understand.
Very interesting. Stan, we've got 5 minutes left with you tonight on Spaced Out Radio. This question always comes up, all right, around here because, for a long time I had a real fear of garden gnomes. And then David Weatherly smartened me up, basically saying, if I bring any negative energy towards garden gnomes, they're going to come start, playing with my mind and playing the tricksters that they are. So I had to quickly start liking garden gnomes. But there's a lot of people who see these. I know, according to Ron Murphy, they have been seen in the Chestnut Ridge and other places. Have you ever investigated garden gnomes?
I've heard the reports. I have not, but I have had reports of smaller entities, and sometimes, again, floating, gliding across highways and through fields. I've had cases, one case this year of an entity of some type was floating across the field late at night, and all the deer ran out of the field. So we've heard, and we didn't even get a chance to talk about this series of incidents for the last few years of this tall, skinny, hairless humanoid creature, sometimes with a glowing head, sometimes with glowing luminous eyes, that a number of people have seen and have come very, very close to people, and it's very interesting.
Oh, it is. It absolutely is. Because, I don't know. I mean, when it comes to these little ones like wood nymphs or gnomes, or something along those lines. I mean, these are creatures that can be seen pretty much anywhere at any time. I know from personal experience, I was out geocaching with my son one day beside a lake, and him and I both saw a little wood nymph about 18 inches tall come walking right into our pathway. And it came across the pathway, took about, a couple of minor steps. It only had little feet. And the next thing I know, it stops and took right back off to where it came from, wherever that was. And I said to my son, did you see that? He was only like three at the time. He's like, yeah. And I was like, whoa, that was kind of weird. But the one thing that I remember about it, it was blurry. It wasn't clear.
Exactly. And that's what we hear about in different cryptids. Sometimes they're physically solid. Sometimes they're misty or foggy or out of focus.
So what is that blurriness then, in your opinion?
Not sure. Could have to do with coming into our reality. It could be a part of the process of them appearing and disappearing. We just only can theorize. We just really don't understand it.
Do you ever get frustrated by not understanding?
Well, I've learned a lot about the phenomena over the years, but also I remember years and years ago you had certain patterns that began to form, and then suddenly you got another case which completely ruined that theory. So the more I know about the phenomena again, the stranger it is.
That's always what it is, my friend. That's always what it is. It's that high strangeness that's almost like a drug that we are seeking out, trying to figure out what we can do to get closer to it. And, one of these days, I hope we do. And I hope it's not in the form of a hunter shooting a Bigfoot or a dog man. I hope, we just come across a creature and a weird skeleton that's just dead. That's just the way it is. I mean, you don't see it often in nature, but that's what I'm hoping for. How about you?
Well, unfortunately, people have shot at these creatures over the years. I don't recommend it, but people have, especially during that rage of 73 when there were so many reports. Nobody ever brought one down. They may have hit it and it fell down, but it generally got up and walked away, or it disappeared in a flash of light or just disappeared. So it's something very strange in some of the cases that we've looked into.
90 seconds to go here, my friend. Everybody's always interested about your research. What are you doing for the end of the year here before we head into 2021? What are you trying to solve in the next couple of months?
Well, reports keep coming in. I'll be doing that. Unfortunately, because of the virus situation, all the many, many speaking events I had have been canceled. But I'm still busy. I'm actually working on my fourth book. And people can go to my website, stangordon.info, for a lot of information, a lot of reports. And my books are available on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com as well.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Well, as we start to wind down time here, Stan, it is always a pleasure to have someone of your stature come on this show. I think it really makes us a much better show for having people like you come on here and really push the limits with your incredible knowledge and your incredible research over the years. Thank you so much for taking the time to share that with the Spaced Out Radio audience.
Well, Dave, thanks for having me on again. I always appreciate it.
We appreciate it, too. And, I'd like to get you back on in the new year, maybe spring, once the snow starts to melt all around, and see what direction hopefully we'll be heading in. Hopefully you'll get some more time in the bush. With COVID, hopefully it'll be over by then, because I know if you're like me, you're itching to get out there. But thank you so much, Stan Gordon, everyone. And, Stan, you just hold on for 2 seconds here, because we're just about to fly off to break here. Coming up next, actually, let's give you Stan's website one more time, stangordon.info, if you want to check it on out. Coming up next, we're going to hook up with Vancouver and The Shift. John's hosting tonight. And we're going to get to the SOR Newswire and Thought of the Day. Stay tuned. Lots of Spaced Out Radio coming up next. Thank you so much, Stan. I'll give you a few claps. I know our YouTube audience is clapping. Really appreciate it, my friend. Really appreciate it.
All right. right. It was always fun to do the show. It was great. We'll do it again someday.
Absolutely, my friend. Take care.
Right. Good night.
Good night. Fantastic guy. Fantastic guy. That's good radio right there. Oh, look at that. Hey, Vancouver, you're early.
Yeah, it's actually Ray tonight. Am I a little too early?
No, we can hang out a little bit. We know how to do that.
Okay, because we are just in a break right now. Be with you in about 3.5 minutes or so. Is that okay?
Yeah. Have I talked to John? Have I talked to John before?
I don't think so. John is filling in this week for Shane, so no, you guys have not been acquainted.
All right. Did Shane get the gig finally?
I don't think so. Not yet, no. I don't know what's going on. I just work here temporarily, too. I'm just filling in for Matt tonight. I'm Ray.
Hi, Ray.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Okay, so not much. I think John, have you communicated with John earlier today about what you guys are going to chat about?
No. No, we're just going to talk some UFOs.
Oh. Okay, cool. I think he wanted to bring to your attention about Ogopogo. I guess you probably know.
We could go wherever he wants to go.
This monster in Canada here.
Yeah, just mention to him we could go wherever he wants to go.
Okay. Yeah, I think he wants to ask you right off the bat about the newest Ogopogo sighting. So, but yep. Okay, we'll be with you in a few. Thanks, Dave.
All right.
Okay, hang on.
For and Live Well has facilitated that for me. It just helps you live well.
Well, let's turn that down. We don't need that right now. Shoot, I forgot to tell him that we're coming out at 36. Oh, well. Hey, gorgeous Teresa with a $2 super chat. Thank you, you beautiful, gorgeous Teresa, you. I love you. Love ya! I better put that up. Oh, look it! I can play with my sound. Isn't that driving you nuts?
Dinner party in support of the Ronald McDonald House Home for Dinner campaign.
That would drive me nuts. It was driving me nuts. So what do you think of the new beard, guys? Fapster, thank you so much for the super chat. You gorgeous Fapster, you. What do you think of the beard? I got it trimmed down today. Looking a little bit more poetic. You know, I still got a good piece to hold on to there, but, you know, not looking as frightening as it was before. Tammy, you better tell Manitoba Becky what she missed out on tonight. Oh, Bomber, you are way too kind. Way too kind. This is my firewood jacket. It's just so damn comfy. It's like ruined. See, like my sleeves are just ruined. But it's just so comfy and warm. Oh, honey, Teresa, you didn't have to do that. It's not about that. I love you and I love your support. You've come to where I've been speaking. You are an amazing, amazing fan of this show, and I just love you for it, Teresa. No matter what, remember that.
Spaced Out Radio. Good evening to you, Dave.
How you doing? It's good to be here.
Doing pretty. Yeah, thank you for being here with us. I'm doing quite well. And the first question for you, Dave, I got to ask you this because we heard it in the all-night headlines.
Yes.
A man in Calgary was vacationing in the central Okanagan, and he thought he saw, yet again, the great mysterious Ogopogo. And boy, I'm glad that it came up in our headlines tonight because now we get to bring it up right with you, Dave. So, first question, Ogopogo. Is it real? What do we know about it?
Well, I still think it's a sturgeon. I totally think it's a sturgeon, and nothing will convince me otherwise, because I have heard stories of this thing having wings and flying from lake to lake around the Okanagan. It's been crazy. I need to ask you a favor, if you don't mind, because my music is about to come on here in about 10 seconds here, and
Okay.
so Ogopogo. You guys will get to hear my music because it kind of rocks a little bit. Hold on one second. Listen.
Sure. Yeah, okay.
Listen to this. All right, we're going to hop right over to Vancouver with the shift. John and I are talking Ogopogo tonight. That's the way we're going to do it here. Just jump right in. John, Ogopogo, latest sighting. There's a lot of people who think this is a sea serpent. There's a lot of people who believe that this Ogopogo is some sort of creature that lives in the dark depths and caves and caverns of Okanagan Lake, which is, if you've never seen Okanagan Lake, it is black. It's not blue water. It's not a nice lake. It is black water. I had the privilege a number of years ago when I was taking my broadcast practicum. You go to BCIT to go to broadcasting school. They make you take a practicum for your final part of your course. And so I did mine in Kelowna at CKOV radio, and I got to fly in a helicopter over the lake. That was the highlight for me. And it is dark, man. That lake is freaky dark. And so could there be something hanging out there? Yes. But the logical answer to that is not a sea creature, but in my opinion, it is a large, great sturgeon, a white sturgeon that we see, can grow up to 14 to 18 feet. They've been seen in the Fraser River. They grow up to, 1,100, 1,200, 1,400 pounds. And, a lot of the scales on the back that people will see, the sturgeon have ridges as well. It's prehistoric looking if it pops its head out of the water. That's what I think we're looking at. I don't think, I hate to break the people's hearts, but I don't think we're looking for it. And trust me, man, I've seen a lot of weird stuff. But when it comes to Ogopogo, I think we're looking at a sturgeon. That's my opinion. Because don't forget, Okanagan Lake actually is the start of the Columbia River, which flows eventually in between Washington State and Oregon.
It's a good point. And I will say that a sturgeon is a very solid guess if you're going to come up with a logical answer as to what this might be, because it does fit the description points that people have been saying for years and maybe even over 100 years. But we got these text messages saying that, it is real. Stephen North Van saying that it's my mother-in-law. So,
could be mine. Could be mine.
Maybe the Ogopogo is basically what you make it to be. And that's the best part about living in this slice of the world, isn't it? Is that there's so many great myths and mysteries out there that have grown its own legs over the years. And because it's become urban legend, it always adds a new element every time it's passed down to a new generation.
Well, let me throw another caveat in there. And I was just talking to a gentleman named Stan Gordon right beforehand, and we were talking about the legendary Thunderbird. This is like a 20 to 40-foot bird. Could you imagine the size droppings this thing has? I'm never going to keep my car clean again just in case this thing is real. But people are still seeing it, and around Pennsylvania where Stan is, they just saw this. But here's the other issue. Okay, we know dinosaurs existed. All right, up until a few 100,000 years ago. I mean, yes, they evolved. The big dinosaurs died off millions of years ago, and then there's been evolution to other creatures since then. What if, just what if, the person actually saw a sea serpent in the lake, but maybe a portal opened up and they were able to see back in time?
Interesting, because, I've heard about the Thunderbird here in this area of the world because it's so closely connected with indigenous culture and the fact that their stories have them described as exactly what you said, those giant birds, 40 feet in length, and it's become so closely tied with how they perceive, if I'm not mistaken, certain times, like the weather conditions, depending on the mood of the Thunderbird, certain ways that you can please the Thunderbird and how they become so associated with what they were doing with their day-to-day lives.
Absolutely. And there is possibility of that. And when it comes to First Nations, Indigenous type of legends, we have to take those with a little bit of seriousness. Look, there's a lot of people out there, especially the scientific community, who is like, well, they're just legends. We don't worry about that. We don't study legends. These are the creatures that are on this planet. But these are stories that have been passed down for centuries, millennia. All right? And if we don't pay attention to those and the events that occurred around them, we may be missing out on some very, very interesting and potentially real cryptid information.
Very good points. I mean, that's why if you have friends that are anthropologists, it's honestly great to have conversations with them because they will tell you all these things that we don't really get to discuss all the time in everyday life. But those that are studying extensively into those particular, fields, it's very, very exciting to see, like, okay, what happened here and how is it impacting life here today? And what are we seeing? Ogopogo, okay, does that trail back to something that happened all those years ago in a completely different culture? It's all connected in that sense. Dave, though, here we are mid-October, Halloween just around the corner. Yes. I'm sure that this is maybe like one of the spookiest times of year, not just because, people are decorating their homes and all those things, but because, there's that belief that it's this time of year, certain full moons come out. This is when energies really start to collect, and those energies can lead to some very dark and sometimes dangerous things.
Absolutely. If you are somebody who is deciding to pull out the Ouija board, don't do it. Don't do it. Okay, because 95% of you never close off the board and say goodbye. And then people like me and other ghost hunters out there have to go up and clean the mess that you've created by making your home and possibly yourself haunted. It is true. Every October, and the more popular that this holiday, can we call it a holiday now? Halloween?
Sure.
The more popular it becomes, the more we are seeing people all of a sudden become amateur ghost hunters, amateur seances, and everything along that ilk, okay? We hear the good ghost stories, everything from, I think every major city across Canada and North America, for a lot of my listeners, has the same ghost, which is a lady in white on the street corner looking to get picked up and get a ride home. You pull over to pick her up, and she disappears while you're driving in your car. Happens all over the place. Happens in Vancouver. It happens in Toronto. It happens absolutely everywhere. But the big thing that a lot of people need to understand out there is the paranormal is nothing to mess with. All right? Even paranormal investigators today, and trust me, about 98% of them out there are what we call weekend warriors in this field, which means they just go for the thrill of the hunt and get a good spook. But the 2% that are actually working hard to try and figure out, is there life after death? What are ghosts? What are spirits? What are entities? Why are places haunted? All right? They are the ones who really push the fact that this is dangerous. And it doesn't sound dangerous because of horror movies or Hasbro or Parker Brothers, whoever is making a Ouija board, and, you're not supposed to conjure up spirits unless you're age 8 or up. There's a lot of interesting things that go along with it. But the majority of people out there don't understand how real it is. You can be attacked. You can have a spirit attached to you. There was a recent article of a Canadian lady who took a piece of artifact from Pompeii. I believe it was a piece of tile. She took it home, and the next thing you know, she's been cursed the last 15 years and sent a note back to with the item back to Pompeii, apologizing and asking the spirits of whatever it was to remove the curse. This happens with Robert the Doll down in Florida. You hear people, and they have a giant wall of people who have sent postcards and letters begging Robert, this doll, for forgiveness because they took a picture of Robert without permission. All right? So there's a lot of little stories like this that the paranormal can be scary. I am someone who has been attacked by a ghost. It's not fun. I don't know how I got the 300 yards to my friend in order to help him, he was a shaman, to help him clear me of it. It was terrible. No idea. 300 yards I walked, and I had no idea how I got there. It's scary.
Well, thankfully you did. Thankfully you did, so that we can be joined by you every week to talk about things like this. It's Dave Scott, Spaced Out Radio. I'll ask you really quickly, Dave. We got about 60 seconds here, but how about when ghosts and spirits test you? Because there's this myth, or I guess like an urban legend in Korea, which is where I'm from, where a man is driving down the road and he sees a hitchhiker, but this hitchhiker, she's got long, dark black hair. She's kind of scary looking, so he just drives past and doesn't pick her up. A few minutes later, again, another hitchhiker. This time she's young, she's beautiful. She's flagging him down, so he pulls over, and he gets her in the car, starts driving along. They have a bit of a conversation, but at some point, she asks him, why didn't you pick me up the first time? And he's confused, and he says, what are you talking about, huh? And then she says, why didn't you pick me up the first time? He looks over at her, and it's the woman from the first time. In fact, it was a spirit that was testing him to see if he was judging essentially a book by its cover. What are those experiences about?
Oh, those there's a legend of the what they call the hags in the paranormal. I think I'm getting that term right, where it's like a witch that screeches and cowers. A lot of times it will follow you around and try and attach itself to you. It almost plays the role of like a succubus. Where it tries to get you to fall in love or preys on your instincts or something along those lines. Don't pick up any hitchhikers. They may be ghosts. It's plain and simple, my friend. It's plain and simple. Yep. Leave the ghosts alone. Don't play with Ouija boards leading up to Halloween. And, if you want some paranormal, I will say this. I realize with COVID, and coming into Halloween, there's a lot of people who have a lot of intrigue about paranormal. There are a lot of good groups out there. If you're interested in getting to know a paranormal team, like if they're good, if they're not, just give us a shout over at Spaced Out Radio. We'll be able to help you out because there's always intrigue and there's always little projects going on where people are looking for volunteers who want to learn more about the paranormal.
Absolutely, especially at this time of year. That is Dave Scott. You can check him out, of course, as always, spacedoutradio.com. Thanks so much for this, Dave. We'll connect with you next week.
Take care, John. All right, let's get to the news here, everyone. The news is always changing, which is why we bring you the SOR Newswire at the back end of every show where we get to the weird, the strange, the wacky, and sometimes the reality. Now, I'm going off script here a little bit because Captain Shirk does have some news for me, to read. But I want to get your opinion on something. And whether it's on Twitter, in the chat box, or on Facebook, you guys could message me. I'm curious. What do you do if your child comes home from school and says they've been hit? So, this happened to me today. My little guy, who's 7, is a pretty good kid. I kind of like him. Well, I get a call from Mom stating that my boy got hit today in the stomach, got punched. And last week, the same boy smacked my kid in the face. So here's the issue that I don't agree with, okay? If my son retaliates, my son gets suspended. He gets in trouble. I don't think it's a case of bullying. I think it's a case of this one boy playing a little bit too rough. Now, I'm not being naive on this. I had a chat with my son today, and yes, I will be talking to the school in the morning about this. But this is reality here. All right? My son got hit twice. Oh, and kicked in the nuts. A couple weeks ago, apparently. Now, my son's the type of kid where he's pretty nonchalant. He lets a lot of things just slide. So, I did what any good dad would do, at least I think, because I think at certain times, talk is cheap. I taught my son how to defend himself tonight. We're practicing some boxing. And I know there's going to be a bunch of people out there say, oh, Dave, you can't resort violence to violence. That's how bad things start. No, sometimes a kid needs a good ass kicking. All right? So I told my son today, I said, son, you never hit anybody. Ever. But if they hit you first, knock them out. He goes, where? Where do I hit him? I said, go for the nose. Go for the nose. Right? Now, a lot of people will say that, I'm promoting violence or I'm promoting anti-bullying with violence or anything like that. Okay? But here's the thing. It's likely the other kids' parents don't know. So tomorrow, I got to get up. I'm going to go to school with my boy, and I'm going to talk to the principal. Because this is my words for the principal. I'm going to tell the principal point blank tomorrow that if my son gets in trouble for defending himself and he gets suspended from school, that I'm going after the school and the school board. Have to. Because you know what? They only ever seem to punish the kid who retaliates to protect themselves. And the one thing that I've noticed, especially in elementary schools today, is that we get away with that. We get away from teaching kids that life is not fair, that life is tough, or that life is easy, and that it's all rainbows and cotton candy. So tomorrow, my school principal, my son's school principal, is going to have a nice talking to, because my son was hit last year by another boy who unfortunately suffers from a real strong case of autism. And sometimes that boy got a little outlandish, and, my son, who tries to be friends with everybody, he would get hit by this boy. So I told his teacher, I said, I taught my son how to fight. I said, point blank, if you give him hell for defending himself, I'll see you in court. All right, so with this new boy that's decided to, hit my boy, all right, because my boy he's a real relaxed kid. I realize, look, I'm the type of parent, okay, who will say to my son, what did you do? Tell me what led to this. And we had that conversation tonight. I said, son, and I took him away from mom. I took him away from his iPad. It was just him and I hanging out, having a man-to-man conversation. Okay? And I said, son, what did you say to do this? And he's like, Daddy, I didn't say anything. He goes, we were playing a game, and I was in at tag, and I ran after him, and I went to tag him, and he popped me in the stomach. I said, well, why did he hit you in the face last week? He goes, I don't know. I said, did you say something that would have caused that? All right, because, it's hockey. All right, there's a lot of hockey sometimes, right? But with my boy, in this case, we had him on the punching bag today. Had him on the punching bag. And I said to him, look, I said, son, you don't hit. Don't go up to him. Don't hit him. But if he hits you first or he hits you again, you hit him. And you hit him 3 times right in the nose. And I said, if the teachers get mad at you, old daddy will come down and have some words. All right? Look, I'm not promoting violence for my son. All right? But I think that every child should have the right to defend themselves. Doesn't matter whether it's against bullying at school. In this case, I believe it's not bullying. I believe it's more of a rambunctious kid who thinks it's okay to hit my son if they get a little worked up. But sometimes little kids need to learn a lesson. And it's not from parents and it's not from teachers. It's from needing their own little ass kicked. All right? I got my son's back. I know my son has my back. All right? And he felt good. He felt good tonight. Dad didn't give him heck. Dad taught him something, a life lesson. And the best part about it is, now he's excited to go play hockey tomorrow afternoon. After school, he's got practice. I'm excited for that. All right. My son will never play in the Quebec Major Junior League because they don't like fighting there anymore. But that's another story. That'll get me upset. But nonetheless, what would you do? Let me know on Twitter, #SpacedOutRadio, @SpacedOutRadio. Let me know on our Facebook page because I'm curious. I'm an upset dad right now. I'm a very upset dad. Like I said, I don't think this is a bullying situation. I think it's a rambunctious child situation who thinks he could get away with hitting my son. Because here's the thing. He kicked my son in the balls. He's now punched him in the face and punched him in the stomach, all while playing games. All right? So in my point, this kid has a little bit of an energy issue that may have to be dealt with. Right? For every action, there's a reaction. And unfortunately, in a lot of schools today, we've stopped teaching that the reaction could be negative. Because we want to police everything. We want to handle kids with care. Adults do it too. But sometimes, just sometimes, reality kicks in. And you got to teach your child self-defense. So that's what we did. Taught some self-defense. I'll say this. My kid could hit hard. He could punch hard. He was punching through I had a pillow up as a punching bag. And he was punching right through that and hit my stomach. And I felt it. All right? Look, I'm not condoning violence in school. Okay? But until you start dealing with the threats of people who are bullying, we deal with it the proper way, rather than trying to punish for having a reaction. Okay? Teachers can't be there all the time. The principal can't do everything. But you can't punish the kid for standing up for themselves. That's how bad things happen, in my opinion. That's how bad things happen. Anyways, we'll get to the thought of the day tomorrow. Thank you so much, everybody who participated on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you to Captain Shirk for the news. Thank you to Stan Gordon and to John on the shift for making this a wonderful show. Thank you for letting me vent as well. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thal rocking in the background with Little Brother is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. Special thanks to everybody listening in at home, at work, in your cars, wherever you may be. Thank you to everybody who's in our chat rooms tonight. You know who you are. On Facebook, Twitter, LGAB, Rev Radio, the Space Travelers Club at our website, and all the snarkers and snarkettes on Twitter at #SpacedOutRadio. Remember, this show is copyright by Spaced Out Radio and SOR Media Ventures Limited. Thank you so much for choosing to share your evening with us, because together, my friends, we own the night. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Remember, my friends, the Woo Train has docked for the night, but tomorrow we shall ride again. Your seats are always available. Your tickets never expire. And if you want to bring a friend, we got room for them too. Good night.